Hey guys, Hunter here with the Grad Matters podcast. I first and foremost just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's been listening, liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing. It helps so much to get the podcast out there to everyone. I also want to say that I did get some merch up on the website now. Got some long sleeve shirts, some short sleeve shirts, got a mug. We'll probably end up getting some more stuff up on there as well. That really means the world to me too, to support the podcast. You know, all the money is just going right back into it. Also started up a Patreon. So if you're interested in a little bit of behind the scenes access, seeing who the guests are early, stuff like that. Definitely check that out. I just want to say thank you to everyone for listening. Enjoy the episode.
I approve waterboarding. They're talking about wakeboarding. The thing about wakeboarding, every trick is an invert.
Backside.
Air railing.
A new dimension.
All right, we're back with another episode of the Grad Matters podcast. Today we have Garrett Cortese on the pod. How you doing, Garrett?
I'm great, man. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here. First question, easy question. Is this the best wakeboard podcast you've been on?
This would only be the second.
Correct.
So, I don't know yet. Let's
To
see.
be determined.
Let TBD, right?
Okay.
We just started.
Okay.
Sorry, Foosh.
Hopefully the answer is yes at the end of this. Referencing Liquid Force's Drop Talk podcast there with Tom Fouché.
Correct.
Him and I have a great relationship.
Yeah, some serious sports bets.
Absolutely. Let's start early days. Okay. So where you grew up?
I grew up in Northern California, Bay Area of San Francisco, and my dad had grown up in the East Bay, and he grew up learning how to water ski and stuff because his dad was an avid water skier, and so that sort of got passed down to us. We had when I was really little, we had a little outboard, like probably 17-foot, super low profile, no windshield, green glitter, like just this sparkly boat. It was awesome. I thought it was the coolest boat ever. And that's what I learned to water ski on in the Delta. And actually, there was a long period that I think that boat broke down first grade, second grade, probably shortly after. I learned to ski when I was about 5.
Okay.
And I think I got up on a slalom ski once or twice then after that. And then that boat broke. And we didn't have a boat for a long time until I think 8th grade, which for me, I'll age myself here, but I think that was I think my dad got a new boat in like 95 or 96. He'd been looking for years. My dad was an avid water skier, subscribed to WSA Magazine. He found a cherry 1990 Malibu Sunsetter with the Euro F3 package. So shout out to Malibu for making that back in the day, because that thing was slick. It was red and white and gray and gorgeous. And so I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And then shortly after that is when I learned what wakeboarding was, and my dad got me a subscription to Wakeboarding Magazine. So that's probably, 8th, 9th grade, 96, 90, 95, 96. But yeah, I grew up going to the Delta a lot. We did family houseboat trips to Shasta. And so being on the water and water sports was always something that was just sort of ingrained in me, just hanging out on the boat, tubing, skiing, all the fun shenanigans, kneeboarding.
Okay, so you started up like a water ski family. What was your first exposure to wakeboarding? Did you see it like on the Delta, or was it the magazine, or remember?
My first exposure would have been WSA Magazine.
Okay. Because
they were starting to put wakeboarders in WSA Magazine. I think Benny G's first cover photo was a WSA Magazine cover.
Really?
So yeah, that would have been my first exposure. And then when I told my dad that I wanted to like try that, because when we got that Malibu and we were, then I was pulling, my dad taught me how to drive that boat straight away so that I could pull him slalom skiing. And I slalomed behind it a couple times and or figured out how to slalom again, but I was never that into it. And I really wanted to try like wakeboarding. And so my dad got one. It was first wakeboard was a Hyperlight Vachon. Hyperlight had a series of, I guess you could call them entry level twin tip boards that were named after the islands in the San Juan Islands, like near their factory up in Pacific Northwest. So the Vachon was what I rode. I think I only had that for one summer though. And then I got a Liquid Force Squirt, which I thought was the bee's knees.
Oh, it was. I mean,
Tony Finn actually sold that to my dad and me. We were,
tell that story. That's
okay. So because I told this to Tom, I think on the podcast, but so there was a dealership in the Bay Area called Cope McFeeters, and they had multiple dealerships throughout, I think, Northern California, Nevada, that sort of region. And every spring they would do like a kickoff sale, and the one that we would go to, like reps from brands would come, and even like pro riders would come, and set up like a little booth with all of their stuff. And I remember like going there one year, and like Byerly was there at the Wake Tech booth with the blue and white, like, you know, signature Byerly, like Wake Tech, that was just so badass. But we're looking at, my dad and I are in the Liquid Force booth, and we're looking at this squirt, and Tony Finn comes up to us. Hey guys, you looking at that squirt? Have you seen Gator and Mayday on that? He goes, huge. And if you've ever met Tony or ever heard Tony, I mean, you can go back and watch all the old X Games videos when Tony was like an announcer for all the PWT and X Games stuff.
A lot of energy.
Tony is a high energy guy. And so, yeah, it's sure as shit. My dad and I bought that instead of bindings, and that was my board for, I think like 5 or 6 years.
Sight unseen. I love it.
Yeah. No demos, no nothing. And then it ended up being so small for, I mean,
That's a long time.
Yeah.
In your growth stages.
So when we got that, I'm probably like a freshman or sophomore in high school, and it's a 125 or something.
So it's probably already too small for you. I mean,
probably. But Gator went huge. So, you know, you got to try and go huge.
What was wakeboarding like back then?
So for me, I was quickly becoming just a huge fan of it. And I just thought I thought it was so cool that there were these now cool professional athletes that fit in with that whole like 90s action sports culture that was just blowing up. You know, wakeboarding was in X Games, and you had these characters like Byerly and Gator and Parks and Darren and Murray, you know, and videos are coming out, and you're waiting each month for a new copy of the mag. And at that point, Wakeboarding Mag was the only thing around. And so there were some smaller things that started coming out in the late 90s. You had Launch and some other stuff, but really Wakeboarding Mag was it. And so you were always looking at, like, you know, what's the instructional going to be? Who's going to be on the cover? What crazy tricks have been landed? And, you know, there was no social media, obviously. The internet was still a baby. And so you're just waiting for movies and mags. And, I was truly a fan. So like, and I think 99 and 2000 are the 2 years that X Games came to San Francisco. And so, we went, and watched them ride in the San Francisco Bay, which was ridiculous. They were in like a harbor that used to be part of like the Coast Guard, I think. And so it's sort of this little protected area, but not really protected. I mean, it's still the freaking San Francisco Bay. And so it's rolly as all get out. But I mean, there are just crowds. It's actually where they held it is, there's an island in the middle of the Bay Bridge between San Francisco and Oakland. It's called the Yerba Buena Island. And so in one of the little harbors in there is where X Games wakeboarding was going down. And me and my like two best friends that I rode with are twins, and so we rode together all the time on the Delta and stuff. Shout out to Mark and Dave White. But we were just like fanboying, just watching these guys like do all this stuff in the worst conditions, and we're just like, this is so awesome, like this is X Games. And I remember I still laugh with Shane about this, because the only professional autograph I ever got as a fan was at that X Games, because Shane was walking through some of the crowd, and I saw him like signing stuff for people, and he was like 2 kids over or whatever. And, you know, at this point, 17 or 18, which means Shane's probably like 15.
I was going to say, Shane's got to be younger than you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, Shane's younger than me. And so he's like 15 or whatever. I'm like, I want Shane Bonifay's autograph. And this is like prime. This might have been just after Wake Pants, but
Okay.
Shane was Shane. Shane was huge.
Yeah.
And so I had Shane like sign. I had this floppy like O'Neill hat, and Shane like signed it for me. And I still tell Shane, I'm like, you're the only autograph I ever got, buddy.
15 years old.
Yeah.
So, I guess I don't know if we want to transition into college yet, because you got into photography young, right? Relatively.
Yeah. Like my around the same time as getting into wakeboarding, my dad had an old film camera that he inherited from his dad, and he had some lenses for it, and just an old manual 35 millimeter Konica, and taught me how to use it. I think in middle school I was starting to mess around with stuff and just taking pictures. I was taking pictures of like the family dog and my mom's roses, you know, like
Just walking around.
yeah, trying to be Ansel Adams or something. Like my mom always had an Ansel Adams calendar and hanging on the wall, and so I was highly influenced by beautiful black and white Yosemite photos. But and so then in 8th grade, I started working for the yearbook in middle school, and I remember the teacher actually. There was one camera for the. Everybody worked on everything in a yearbook like that. It's more just like this fun sort of elective class. Yeah. And the teacher let me, take the camera for like a week or something, and I was taking pictures around campus. And then when the film came back and the pictures were printed, she said, "I just want you to like keep using the camera and keep focusing on this, and because you obviously enjoy it, and it seems like you have an eye for it." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, that sounds good." And then, at the end of my 8th grade year, I grew up in a town that's small. There's like 4 or 5 grade schools, 1 middle school, and then 1 high school. So like probably like 20,000 kids. I mean, it's the Bay Area, so you're in a major metropolitan area, but like just the smaller town, if you will. And so the yearbook teacher from high school came and met with us just to talk about what it's like then to work on a bigger yearbook. And he started talking about that they have a dark room, and you get to, if you're a photographer, you take the pictures, develop the film, print your own photos and stuff. And I was like, holy cow, that sounds awesome. And so freshman year, I signed up for yearbook and begged him to let me be a photographer. Because normally those spots, there was only 4 or 5 spots in that dark room with developed like light machines. And they were usually held for seniors because that's like, it's their yearbook. And so the seniors are going to take most of the pictures and do that. And but I begged him, and I brought in a manila envelope with all these different prints of stuff that I had taken over the last 2 years or whatever. I got
my resume right here.
I got my resume. Like, here's my portfolio, and it's literally just like it's like the Kodak envelope. That's like because you've got it from the Walgreens Developing Center or something, like. But he had remembered me from coming to the middle school and like talking to us, and he knew that I was like actually really interested. And so he let me do it. It was me and 4 senior girls in the darkroom every day, 5th period yearbook.
Attaboy, Garrett.
I got so harassed and teased, but I loved it. But it was super funny. And actually, so then from there on in, I manipulated my schedule throughout high school so that I could work on the yearbook every year. So I did the yearbook all 4 years.
I was going to say, people typically don't take yearbook
for 4 years.
Maybe more than twice. I feel like once or twice is the most you're going to do it.
Right. But. And I even kudos to a teacher like Mr. Morgan, Glenn Morgan, love him. And I'm still in touch with him on Facebook. But he, there was one year I couldn't get the period that yearbook was in. I couldn't get it open. And he was also an English teacher. And so he said, what period do you have free? He said, you'll be my TA, sign up to be my TA. And then I'll just have you go in the darkroom and you can work on the yearbook. He's like, you don't have to do any TA stuff for me.
Perfect.
And so, I just think back on something like that and how much of a difference it can make to have a teacher that sees something, even if it might turn into nothing, but they see a kid that has a passion for something and they're there to actually nurture it and encourage it, as opposed to, just trying to get by with their day and finish grading their papers and go home or something. So
right, I feel like at least in my perspective, it's tough if you see a kid that's so excited and so energetic about something. It's like,
right,
how can you say no? Right, you got to make it work and figure out a way. And that's people like that in your life, especially on the early stages, are super crucial.
And I loved it. I would try to go to every sports game, and I was taking my buddies on the football team, my buddies on the baseball team, soccer, basketball, tennis. I played tennis, and so I'm like. If I lost my match, which is what usually happened, then I'd be taking pictures of everybody else still playing.
Okay, so photography early. When did you start getting some attention for your photos? Probably not in high school.
College.
College, okay.
Yeah, so initially, in middle school, around the time I'm getting into, I'm not into wakeboarding yet. I had a subscription to Powder Magazine. In the winters, we grew up going to Tahoe and snow skiing, and Powder was my Bible. And I wanted to, once I made the connection that people got paid to write stories and take pictures, I was like, I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna work for Powder Magazine. And then I told my parents at some point, I'm gonna go to school somewhere in Colorado so I can ski all the time and take pictures for Powder Magazine. They're like, sure, Garrett, sure, sounds great. And then it was my freshman or sophomore year of high school, I learned about University of Colorado, and that it was in Boulder, and Powder Magazine was headquartered in Boulder. And then I learned that University of Colorado had a school of journalism. I was like, this is
perfect, slam dunk.
It's like writing itself. And so yeah, I thought I had it all figured out. Went to school to study journalism, University of Colorado, with plans to ski all the time, and loved it. Absolutely loved it. But really got connected to the University of Colorado. Did not have a like a photo major. So when I was working, when I was doing photography, there was a couple photography classes, and the kids that took that class that were serious about like doing photojournalism were a really tight knit group. And the professor, shout out Kevin Maloney, was incredible. Like one of those super just nurturing guys that really got it and would really push you and really try and get you as many opportunities as you could, even though there was only 2 photo classes at the school and there wasn't like a major, like a certain, like there wasn't a set path for photographers to take. It ended up helping me in my career because I chose a news editorial major because I knew I wanted to work in like newspapers or magazines, and that taught me how to write and edit a little bit better than what I had been doing. So that set me up then to start doing work for the Wakeboard Mags. But I got so into the journalism side that I wasn't actually then trying to take pictures of snow skiing and do stuff for Powder Magazine. Like, because when I was in school, I was really focused on, it was almost like being in a yearbook in high school, but I was working for the student newspaper and trying to cover every sporting event. I thought being on the sidelines for like a Buffs football game or basketball game was super fun. And it was, it really was a lot of fun. And there was even like little pipe dreams of like, maybe I could do like the Sports Illustrated path or something, like get into, if the wakeboarding thing doesn't work out. And so I focused on all of that, like while I was in school, and I would take my camera, I would get my season pass, and me and my buddies would head up the hill like multiple times a week. And I would always like put my camera in the car, think like, okay, today I'll set some stuff up and take some pictures. And then I'd get there and be like, I don't know, I just want to go ski or
It's
ride.
too fun.
Yeah, it's too fun.
Yeah.
And so I think I only did 1 or 2 photo shoots with snow stuff. I photographed the CU ski team a couple times, which was actually fun, like an actual ski race.
Yeah.
But never did that. And then I'd go home on summer break and be back into the whole wake scene with my buddies that I grew up doing it with. And I started, 2002 would have been the first year that I really tried to push it. And the student newspaper Boulder was cool enough to loan me one of their cameras. So they had a basic Canon digital camera. It was I think Canon's first like entry digital SLR. And they let me borrow that and 2 lenses. And I got to take them home. Oh, it was on the condition that I was doing like an internship. And so I took a free internship in my local newspaper, and I was shooting assignments for them like 2 days a week, which was still fun for me because it's helping my career also, and giving me some school credit. But then weekends or anytime I'm not like picking up an assignment, I'm out at the Delta with my buddies, and we're figuring out how to like make pictures that look like what we're seeing in Wakeboarding Mag. So I bought a plastic bag water housing. And it's literally like, it's almost like a glorified Ziploc lunch bag. And we would throw this like, at the time, a very expensive camera that I did not own. I remember my dad asking, like, do we need to take out like an insurance policy on this? I was like, I don't know.
It says it's water. I mean,
it says it's
plastic bag
waterproof.
will work, so.
He's like, I don't have to write I'm writing enough checks to University of Colorado. I don't need to write
Paying
one for a camera.
out of state tuition here.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And so, so I started, it was that same summer that I discovered Alliance.
2002?
Yeah, so okay. 2002 is when I discovered Alliance. It had been around for about a year. The local, there was a local snow ski and water ski wakeboard shop. And we were me and my buddies were in there to get something, like a life jacket or something. And they had a stack of Alliance in a box, like by the front checkout desk. And we're like, oh, what's this wakeboard mag? And we're like, oh, cool, a new magazine. And I remember first thing I did was, after looking at the photos, going into the masthead and seeing like who makes this magazine and where are they located. And I was like, oh, they're in California. And so it just started wheels started turning, like maybe they want some pictures of like guys from California. And I just immediately started emailing, at the time was Bill McCaffrey and Tony Smith, where, Bill was the publisher who helped start it. Tony was the editor. And I harassed them regularly via email with
just spamming them stuff.
Just spamming them, me and like, check out my buddies on the Delta, like doing, no grab threes and, no grab like inverts and stuff. And, but they, kudos to them. They were cool enough to give me the time of day. And I had my first published photo then later that year.
So 2003 then, is that? Or
2002.
2002. Okay. Do you know what was that photo?
That was Rich Facciano on the Delta, which is another cool thing. So what ended up happening was I'd harassed Bill and Tony enough that Bill reached out to me. At the time, the West Coast scene was really connected by a lot of the different contests that were going on at the time. And so you had like Vans Triple Crown stuff, usually up in Portland. You had a Pro Tour stop in Reno or down south. I forget, maybe Castaic was the lake they did those. And there were Malibu Open did something, or Malibu did the Malibu Open every year in Sacramento at these like private ski lakes called Bell Aqua. So Bill hits me up and says, "Hey, have you ever been to Malibu Open? Would you want to come? And I'd be happy to meet you and introduce you to some people and see if you wanted to like do some pictures of them later on." I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. And so I drive out, and that's like a 2-hour drive for me. But I drive out to Sacramento and meet Bill. He introduces me to a lot of the guys that ride on the Delta time. And some of those are some pretty OG guys that had been in videos and stuff over the years, like Rich Facciano, Josh Smith, Darren Razor. That's where I first met Mike Schweeny. But at any rate, so Bill put me in touch with those guys and like, yeah, we're going to ride next week, like in Discovery Bay. Do you want to like come out? I was like, yeah, sure. So I go out there. Ricky Gonzalez was hanging out with them for that week. So I went out with those guys for like 2 days and just shot photos and tried not to look like a total amateur because I was. I had never shot guys like doing like tricks like they were doing or hitting double ups like the way they were hitting double ups and stuff. And so it was very amateur of me to like be like just pointing the camera at them and hoping I was getting stuff. But we ended up we got a cool shot of Rich hitting a double up underneath. It's called the Old River Bridge. Me and there's a guy shooting video. I forget his name, but he was shooting some video. And so we actually climbed up the pilings of this bridge and stood on this little platform while they did like double ups under us. And I remember being like really pleased with the photo and thinking it looked cool. There's like this old like decaying barn in the background, and it was you could tell instantly it's a Delta photo.
Yeah.
But I had no idea how to submit it to the mag. So I'm just in Photoshop. I'm thinking like, okay, it needs to be really high resolution. So I think when I saved it, I was like, I need to save it as a TIFF, and I'm just going to put like 600 DPI for the resolution or whatever. And so it's like, it's taking, a 3 megapixel file and just trying to like expand it. And the guys made it work. It actually looked all right in print, but it was the first digital spread that Alliance had ever run. And I remember thinking like, once I saw like my name in the corner, and like Photo Cortese or whatever, I was like, oh yes, I'm in.
Tell mom and dad they can quit their day job. I'm good now. So do you get paid for that photo? How does that work?
Yep. Yeah. So like when you submit stuff to the mags, they usually have a page rate, and then after a magazine goes to print, they go through and pay the photographers the page rate.
You remember what that was?
I remember what it was when I eventually became the editor and had to like fill those out, like the page rates. But back then, maybe a couple $100.
Okay, not bad though.
No. Like I think a cover back then might have been like $350 or $400, and then a double page spread was like $200, $250 or something. So,
okay,
yeah. I mean, for me being a college kid, I was like, dude, yeah, I'm in a mag. I actually had 2 photos in that mag. I had one of a wakeboard instructor from Lake Shasta named Ian Kirk. I had a half-page photo of him, and so yeah, the special issue, the October 2002 issue, because I remember it came out, and then I'm home for Thanksgiving break, and I'm with like all of my family for Thanksgiving, and it's just getting passed around like Garrett's in a magazine,
and that is a cool moment. That's got to be really
it was fun.
Awesome.
It was fun. Yeah, for sure.
So that relationship with Alliance continues to build, right?
Yes.
So after that first photo, you're getting more photos. When does it turn from you're still going to school and doing this to like, okay, the relationship's building?
So summer after I graduated in 2004, I had a couple guys that I knew through the region. 2 of them were brothers, Ty and Ian Udell. They were from Montana, but went to University of Arizona and had a relationship with Centurion, and wild story. But so I had met Ty like a summer, like in 2003, and at this point I'm really close with a lot of the guys from like the NorCal sort of scene, Mike Sweeney, Aaron Aubrey. I had just met Daniel Dowd, Derek Cook, and Ty was like, hey, like I want to do a road trip from when school's done. I want to do a road trip from Arizona up through California, up through the Northwest, and then over to my parents' place, you know, where I grew up. And he grew up on a place called Swan Lake. And so we've all decided, well, okay, we'll just get our cars and road trip together, and we'll stop where we stop and figure out places to crash, and we'll find friends and whatever. Ty is leaving University of Arizona, coming to Southern California. He had just gotten new tires put on his truck, towing his brand new boat, and one of the wheels was not put on properly. And so he's going down the freeway, and it comes off, and he is fortunately, it was a part of the freeway. There was like a grass, like median between each lane of traffic or whatever. And, but he's rolling. Like, so his wheel comes off his truck, spins, he's in the grass and rolling now. Boat is ejected off the trailer, totaled, car's totaled. Fire department shows up. Ty is lucky that he made it. And the only reason that they started talking to him, they're like, we were expecting to find like body parts. And the only reason that you're alive is Ty had a little 50cc bike that he couldn't fit in the bed of his truck because of all of his stuff he'd packed up from college. And so he put it in, he had a half cab pickup truck. So he put it in the back of the half cab up on the seat, and it acted as it was high enough up to act as like a roll cage.
Whoa.
Yeah. So Ty almost dies, and we're all like, well, what are we going to do with our, and actually the only thing he ended up with was bruised ribs from the seatbelt and rolling, just like he had bruised ribs. Lucky. Wow. Super lucky. So he has to tell Centurion that this brand new boat that he'd just gotten is totaled. And, but he starts telling them like how bummed he is because he had plans to do this road trip with, actually there was another photographer we were friends with named Mike Eisler, who was going to school in Southern California. He's from here in Orlando, but he had been doing work for Wakeboarding Mag for a couple of years. The two of us were going to do photography on this trip, and Ty was like, yeah, we were gonna do stuff for both the mags and, you know, get some good exposure for Centurion. And I just feel bad. Like this is, you know, falling apart. And Centurion goes, well, we actually have our company RV that's not getting used right now. And we could probably hook up one of the boats we just did our marketing shoot. And like, they're like, if you can, you know, handle it and take care of it, like you guys are welcome to use it for like the next 6 weeks. And so Ty calls me, he's like, I got good news and bad news. And, so they literally, Centurion at the time in 2004 handed a group of like 5 of us the keys to this 60-foot rig.
One of which you just totaled a car and a boat.
I remember the guy that's like handing us the stuff. He's like, any of you guys ever driven an RV before? We're all like, no. And he's like, so you've never driven an RV with towing a boat? No.
How big of an RV are we talking?
Like 35 foot.
Full size. Okay.
Yeah, full size RV.
Wow.
Full size RV and with a 23-foot boat. So, I mean, you're looking at like a 60-foot rig, you know, tip to tail. And yeah, so we got into shenanigans. That 6 weeks in 2004 was a blast.
You don't have to worry about a place to stay anymore.
No, it didn't have to worry about a place to stay. And they were just like, their one condition was if there's a contest going on, we would love for you guys to like be there and like park the bus to get some exposure. And we're like, sure, of course. We were planning on doing that anyway. We want to go party. And but we totally got flack because we were like just these young like kids with no real pro connections, and we're showing up at like the Mastercraft Pro Tour with like the Centurion RV, you know, and it's like, what are you guys doing? Like, you can't be here. And but we had so much fun, like just traveling around all over the Pacific Northwest. And I ended up writing 2 different stories from that trip for Alliance, and that definitely planted the seed in terms of me doing more regular work for them because I could go on the road, write a story, shoot the photos, and hand it off to them to put in the mag.
Yeah.
And so that definitely planted a seed. Long way of getting to that answer. Sorry.
Okay. So, no, that was a great story. So after that trip, you come away with 2 stories, a bunch of photos. When is your internship in Muskegon? Is this after or before?
Okay, so this is after that summer. So okay. I spend that whole summer, and once those first 6 weeks are done, I'm I'm out at like Lake McClure all the time. That's where Mike Schweeny ran his West Coast camps, houseboat and houseboats. I was out there all the time. Me and like some of the other NorCal guys would go out there and do photo shoots, and then also like help teach the kids. And then I'd run out to the Delta all the time. I did another road trip down to Havasu with a former pro from that area named Brian Francis, and again Mike Iser, the other photographer. And so I did a ton of shooting and got a fair amount of stuff published, but nothing to where I'm like, I'm making money. I was not making money. I was losing money based off of just gas and other expenses. And so that fall hit, and I'm now, I'm a college grad, and I've spent my summer like doing an awesome, like just had best summer ever. And, but I'm like, okay, do I want to be like living back at home and not knowing exactly what's next? So I started applying to internships at newspapers. I was like, let me at least like find a paid internship. And if I have to go the journalism route, I can, that's my degree. I have a full portfolio, worked at the student newspaper. And back then, newspapers were still a thing. If you were a photographer, you would do 1 or 2 like paid internships to get experience and then latch on somewhere as a full-time staffer. There was a photography community that I was a part of all through college. It was called sportshooter.com, and they put on like workshops. It was basically like your old like forum but for photographers, where people would get on the chat rooms, and talk photography. People would share their photos and critique each other, and then they would set up workshops, and people could pay to attend the workshops. And they had great programs for students, including a paid internship sort of Rolodex or list, and you could click on their internship page and read all these other photographers that had done internships at all these other newspapers. They would write reviews about that internship program. And the #1 rated internship at Sports Shooter was Muskegon Chronicle. And so I was like, well, I'm going to apply to this one. And so I probably tossed out 8, 10. I picked 10 different newspapers I thought would be sort of fun. Like I did one in Colorado because I had just spent 4 years there in college. I did like the one up in Portland. I did one Las Vegas. I think I did the Las Vegas like Journal Review is what it was called. And the first paper that hit me back was Muskegon Chronicle. And I talked on the phone to the photo editor. He said, I really liked your portfolio. I really like the letter that you wrote. And I'm an Eagle Scout. And so he was like, I love the fact that you're an Eagle Scout. I'm one too. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And so he's like, I have an opening for our winter internship. And so I'm talking to him this is probably like October of 2004. He's like, I got one that starts in January if you're interested in spending the winter in Michigan. I was like, and I'm thinking to myself, I lived in Colorado for 4 years. How bad could it be?
Pretty bad.
And so I packed up the old SUV and drove across the country, from California to Michigan in January, and to do that internship. And the funny thing about it was I'd finished all that work all that wakeboarding work over the summer. I mean, no less than a week after I accept the internship. So now this is later in October. Bill McCaffrey calls me and just checking in and see how things are going. And he says hey, we're talking about, adding a staff member, but we're not exactly sure when we're gonna be able to do it. But your name is on that list, just because of what you have done this past summer. Everybody likes working with you, blah, blah, blah. And, but would you potentially be open to moving to Orlando? And I'm like, yeah. I was like, full disclosure, I just accepted an internship and it's a really good one. I'm excited about it. And it goes from January to May. I'm like, would that affect things? Do I need to cancel? He's like, no, we'll figure that out. He's like, but how about in the meantime, let's get you out to Florida and see how you like it. And so that November, I came to Florida, to Orlando for the first time. So November of 2004, and just did some photo shoots. And one story, me and Tony Smith, the editor, and Kobe Mikasic, Sean O'Brien, and another photographer named Jason Lee went down to Miami Homestead Raceway, and there was a a wake fan who worked on one of the gas teams, and everybody knows him now as Robbie Maushop. He does Operation Wake Surf, and he's like Mr. Pass the Handle. So Robbie back in the day he was the gas man for a NASCAR team, but he loved wakeboarding. And so he knew from reading wakeboarding magazines that Kobe was into racing and race cars and stuff. Kobe always had like this old classic Porsche. And so Robbie started pinging guys at magazines about like, hey, I think I could get you guys like onto one of the lakes at one of the, there's a couple different NASCAR tracks that have a lake in the middle. And Homestead is one of them. It's tiny. It's probably smaller than O-Dub's boat lake.
Okay.
But so Kobe brought his boat down and we put it in, and we're like during the race, like these guys are just wakeboarding. And it was hilarious and it was awesome. I've never experienced anything NASCAR before. And, being a California kid, you just sort of like write it off as like, it's just, silly. They go in cars in circles or whatever. But like when you're in it, it's so rad. It's crazy.
That's a big party too, right?
Yeah. In the infield and stuff, big party. Like we had fun down there. And I remember I think my favorite memory of that whole thing was that middle of the race, or not middle of the race, but a little bit towards the end of the race, this guy comes like running towards the lake and like where we have the boat waiting. And it's Robbie and is still in his full like suit, but he's holding like a board and board shorts.
Trying to get a set in.
And so he's like, our car just crashed. We're out of the race. That means I get to ride earlier. So Robbie came and hung out on the boat, and I think he likes I think he took a wakeboard set. But yeah, so I did that in 2004, and then in January I left to go to Michigan to do my internship.
Okay, and probably some good photos from that.
From the race?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any of those anywhere?
Yeah, they're probably.
We'll pull those up after.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool to put in.
And then, so then after that trip, so basically around December, like before I'm leaving for Michigan, Bill's like, hey, so I think the internship's like a good experience for you, and like if you're not starting for us until May, like that actually that works for us in terms of like the season starting to pick up in May, and it lets us get like our ducks in a row leading up to that. So he's like, once you're done with the internship, just consider yourself like on staff with Alliance and get ready to move to Florida. I was like, cool. So
awesome.
Yeah. I was very much right place, right time. Lucky with my timing for sure.
Yeah.
I just like looking back and just in terms of like how some things fell into place. And granted, like you have to be prepared for like when the lucky things do happen, like when the timing does hit, like, cause if you're not, then you're going to miss that opportunity. Right. And so obviously I was seriously trying to improve my photography and my writing and, doing these things, but I had a lot of things just like work out well timing wise.
Yeah. So did you do it was a gear guide, right? Before that internship? Was that in the fall?
So I shot that in when I went to Orlando in November.
Okay.
I shot that gear guide photo. Well, yes, you want to talk about that cover story?
That's a funny
So
story.
my first cover, quote unquote cover of Alliance would have been, I guess that is then the 2005 gear guide. And I'm staying at Tony Smith's place on Lake Killarney in Winter Park. And he's like, hey, yeah, there's here's what I'm thinking for the cover. We're going to use Greg's Super Aeronautique, Greg Necrason. He lived on the same lake. And Cassette just came out with these bi-level wake skates. We're going to put one of those up in the rack. And then Hyperlite has this thing they're calling the Roam. And so back in the day, Hyperlite was making very much a snowboard-shaped wakeboard with wood construction, tons of flex, really just made for having fun in the park, buttering around, pressing. And he's like, let's put these in the rack and like shoot it with the sunset. And so we're on Tony's dock, we're shooting these photos, and I'm trying to like get it the angle that he wants. And he's like, and Tony also takes pictures. And if you ever have any old issues of Alliance, you can go back, and anything that's named Hack is Tony Smith's photo. He didn't want to have his own name, but Tony was actually a pretty accomplished photographer, just went by the name Hack. And so Tony picks up my camera, and at one point he's like, I'm thinking like, go like this. And like he snaps one or two photos. And then I take all the rest. But then the one that the art director ends up picking and putting on the cover is the one that Tony actually shot. And so they gave me credit for it and, paid me for it and stuff, but I never took credit for it. And so I still don't consider it like my first quote unquote cover.
I mean, Tony Smith, the opposite of Hack. If you take one photo,
right,
and it's used and the photographer's taking a bunch.
This kid that you're getting ready to hire is just like laid through a memory card. Couldn't get it right.
Oh, that's too funny. So then you go to Muskegon.
Yep. Freeze my buns off.
Anything eventful happen the internship?
I mean, it it was miserably cold, but such a great experience. Like that photo staff was a really like special group of people, and I understood. And the photo editor Greg Dorset, who is no longer with us, but really special guy, and I could see why so many interns came from there and went on to like successful photojournalism careers. Like there's guys that went on to National Geographic. There's guys that went on, you wouldn't think it, but for a small community newspaper. But then like you look at the roster of like kids that were internships there that went on like really successful professional photography careers, whether it's in straight photojournalism newspaper stuff or other things like National Geographic, and it's impressive. And so it was just a very memorable experience.
What do you do in Muskegon? Which, for those who don't know, Michigan in those months is just a barren,
and
depressing wasteland.
And Muskegon is on Lake Michigan, so it is probably about halfway up the glove, if you will. And so it's a couple hours or an hour north of Grand Rapids, I think. And in the winter, you ice fish. That's so there is Lake Muskegon, which is connected to Lake Michigan, and it freezes over, and there's a huge ice fishing scene. And so I remember photographing some of it, and I had to photograph an ice fish rescue because some guy went a little too far out during the spring months, and when it's getting a little thin, and he found himself swimming when he didn't want to be swimming.
No good.
And so they had to send out the rescue boat and go pick him up, and I had to take pictures of the rescue. So your day-to-day there as an intern is really just seeing what comes across the assignment desk. The photo editor will look at like what's going in and, come in and be like, okay, like here's what you're doing. And it was a wide variety. Sometimes there was nothing, and you would just be asked to go find a slice of life. And so you drive around town, and I would inevitably like find myself like at like a skate park, and like I'd find kids that were doing something sort of fun and different in the winter. And I remember like I took some photos of some kids on their BMX bikes, some kids on their skateboards, just to try and mix it up.
Yeah.
Some kids when it did get warmer, like some kids like playing in a creek, or you go to one of the boat yards and find guys getting boats ready for the season. They're starting to dewinterize them and stuff, but. So
didn't decide you wanted to live in Michigan after that, though.
No, I did not. I mean, and I knew that like I obviously had the Alliance gig lined up. I was doing it for the experience, and I wasn't half-assing it by any stretch. I really wanted to. I didn't want to be the intern that like was there and left a bad mark. They have like this list of like other really successful photographers, and there's this one.
This guy came in.
This
and he was ready to leave.
This slack ass wakeboard kid. But they were so supportive. Like, and actually, I didn't even tell them. I didn't want them to know that I had a job lined up when the internship started, because I didn't want them to ever have that as like a thought in their head. Like, oh, he's already got a job lined up. What's he even like? Does he even care about this?
Yeah.
So I didn't tell them until they knew that I had done like wakeboarding photography. My first real cover, that's what happened. My first real cover was the next issue after that gear guide, and it came out when I was doing my internship. And so they Alliance sent some copies to me in Michigan, and so I brought them in to show like the other photos. I was like, this is my first cover, and it was a shot from earlier in that summer in 2004 when I was in Montana, and Brian Francis boosted on a double up. But
okay,
yeah,
first cover. So then finish up with the internship. Get hired on by Alliance.
Yeah.
What is the role that is?
I started out as like the staff photographer and Tony's like assistant editor. I think I was a managing editor, and basically I was just whatever Tony was too busy to do, I would help with. I took over writing some certain articles, or and definitely like photographing a lot of stuff, like especially like the departments. Like if we needed their instruction was called Come Correct at the time. So, hey, we needed this rider doing this trick.
Still is. I think there's still some videos recently that are Come Correct.
Yeah,
so.
Probably the name is still in use. And, but yeah, so it was basically just a lot of photography, writing some of the departments, helping edit the content that's coming in from other guys that are writing, and then helping Tony pick out photos. Like we would go through like different photographers' submissions and pick out photos for each issue of the mag. And so it's just
a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you moved to Orlando, Where'd you first stay at? And
I stayed. So I was crashing at Tony's place. I was originally supposed to move in. Kobe Mixich at the time had a couple rental houses on Lake Holden, which is one of the sort of like downtown Orlando lake scenes with, its own crew. And that fell through right before I was moving out. And so Tony was like, well, I guess you're just going to crash on my futon until we find a place for you to live. And so what ended up happening was a couple months into it, and it actually worked out really well because Tony ended up doing like, I think a month or 6 weeks in Europe. He ended up connecting like multiple wakeboard trips. Like he was in Italy with like Ben Greenwood and Aaron Reed. I think that was like, I forget who that was with. And then he was with like the DVS crew in like the Czech Republic. And then he was in like the UK for Wakestock UK. So he's gone and I'm just living in his place. So it actually ended up working out. But when he came back, he said, hey, there's this kid that goes to school down the street at Rollins College named Jeff McKee. I was like, oh yeah, I've heard of Jeff. I've seen him in the mag since he was a kid. I think Jeff had his first published photo when he was like 12. He's like, yeah, we're going to do an instructional with him. So he's got his boat, over there, and just go meet up with him and get a sequence of him. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, no problem. And I go and meet up with Jeff and I think Jeff and Rathy were riding together that day. And I start shooting with Jeff and we start shooting the breeze. And he's like, hey, so yeah, you just moved here. Like Tony said, you're working for the mag. And I was like, yeah. He's like, well, where are you staying? Or where'd you move to? I don't have a place yet. I'm crashing on Tony's futon and I got an empty room in my house. You want to check it out? And so, literally like a week later, checking out Jeff's place, and I moved in like a month later, I think. And then I lived with Jeff for like 4.5 years, and he's one of my best friends to this day. And so, yeah.
Jeff McKee.
Good old Jeff.
So how many mags, do you have any idea, right when you were getting started, 2004, 2005, 2006, what the units on those mags were per issue, per year? Like, you have any rough guess on that?
I don't. I'm going to say maybe in 05, like the 30,000 range, 40,000 range.
Per issue?
Per issue, 30,000, like copies. Yeah. That's my guess for Alliance.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit more. I can hit up the guys and find out, but.
Rough estimate's fine.
Yeah.
I guess for those who, magazines aren't really a thing much anymore.
No.
In those 2005, 2006, all the way up until, you're ending at Alliance, what goes into putting together a magazine?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. Yeah. So you structure out, you try and work with, obviously you have a certain amount of space for some of the bigger features, and like, do we want to do an interview? Who's trending, or what would be a really interesting interview subject? Or you're putting feelers out there. At this point, you also have brands putting their feelers out to you. Like, hey, we're thinking about doing like this type of team trip. Like, would you be interested in making a story out of it? That sort of thing. And in those days, 05, 06, 07, is when we were making Pull. There was a TV show that Alliance made called Pull on Fuel TV. And a lot of the magazine's content was tied together with Pull, which was fun because you're actually not as beholden to like whatever a brand is doing. We were able to then start pitching different brands or different riders on, hey, like we're thinking about doing something like this for Pull, and brands would want to like join in, and then you could make a story out of it for the mag. But then you've also got all of your departments to fill, and so what are you going to do for the Come Correct instructional? What are you going to do for who's writing? We had different like opinion columns. One was called Matters. And so like you'd get in different writers to write like opinionated pieces. And Alliance back then was very much just the more freewheeling, free thinking, we're going to print what we want type of attitude. And I mean, they're super fun to like put together, but yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And then you're hitting up all the other photographers in the industry about like, hey, who have you shot with recently? Do you have anything you want to submit? All that fun stuff. So
Matters. Anybody write anything on grabs that mattered? Or
oh yeah.
Yeah?
Oh yeah.
Grab matter.
Yep. Yeah, there's lots of debates about grabs back in the day. About what was legit and not legit, and because at one point like nuclear and like seatbelt stuff was very not in fashion, and obviously now it's very back in fashion. There's some of the debates that I mean, there were debates that people got into. I remember in the wake skate industry, huge debates about whether you could ride finless or not. Huge debates. You could probably actually go online and find some of the arguments on, like, there was a wake skating forum.
Yeah.
And I think Nick and Reed used to get in the middle of some of it and have fun with it. But
that one doesn't make any sense to me. Why
it did back then.
Why does it matter?
But like, because you could, fins, you had more tracking and you had to like land it more properly, as opposed to like sort of like swiveling it around. Maybe you might have to land it a little more legit to, properly stomp it.
Okay.
So the saying goes, but yeah, huge debates.
Stuff like that's so funny.
Oh yeah.
It's just super funny. Who do you think, a little random question here, who do you think is the most influential rider of all time?
Of all time?
Yep.
Man. Parks? It's my top 3 most influential riders of all time would be Parks, Byerly, and Raff. Byerly just had this effect on the entire sport that really, as it was transitioning from an outshoot of water skiing, and so much of the water ski companies were just starting to make like wakeboards, and there was very much a water ski mentality to just competitions and like, well, like you can cut really hard and get air like this, and you can cut outside the wake and release your edge and do a trick with no wake, and there's just this very much a lot of like almost like a trick ski mentality, like trick. And Scott brought this like board riding mentality, and his personality just was exactly what I think wakeboarding needed at the time. And then Parks obviously grew up as a 3-event skier. He was a show ski baby. He's a little Guinness World Records baby. And so Parks had that sort of like background, but then as he got to be an older teenager and he's in X Games and stuff, and then Parks just went from being Parks the crazy like competitor to Parks it wasn't just like Parks Bonifay, like son of like legendary show skiers. It was just Parks, and every magazine, every major sponsor, every contest, dropping tricks that have never been done before. I mean, how many years did it take for somebody to land the second 1080 after Parks landed the first? So Parks was so far ahead of his time, and he still has fans. Like people still recognize Parks, and he's still doing a ton to promote the sport. He still puts on Double or Nothing. So I would say if you're going to go for most influential all time, it might be Parks. Yeah.
Good answers. I've heard it put that Byerly didn't invent wakeboarding, but you could say he's like the father of wakeboarding.
His nickname was the Godfather.
So
and you could say that for wake skating too, because then what Scott did for wake skating he created the toe jam, and those were the first like legit wake skate contests. I mean, where they're building pool gaps, and at first, like before the winch was a really like relevant, reliable thing, like they're pulling guys through pool gaps on jet skis and just letting them like try tricks. And it was just, but it was rad. I remember like Aaron Reed stomping like a back lip out of a pool gap with a winch in 2005 was just like mind blowing. And now look at like where wake skating is, so.
Where is wake? Yeah. Let's, what happened to wake skating? Because wake skating was huge. I was going through these old mags, early 2000s, mid 2000s, even
we
2008.
Were at Alliance. Alliance was a huge advocate of wake skating, and we would go back and forth. Some of our debates were like, how much wake skating can we put, before it's actually too much, or how many times should there be a wake skate cover? If we have 7, 8, 9 issues a year, how many of those should be wakeboarding? How many should be wake skating? And I think what happened to wake skating, it almost got a little too core. Everybody, like the pros got so good that at some point, like wake skating's hard, and
super hard,
and it's some of it probably became unrelatable, and then you had this growth of like the whole private park scene. You had Reed with Battle Falls, and you had Nick with his place up in the Oak Forest. You had the Sewanee Pro. You had Ben Horan's backyard. So you had this growth of private parks where a lot of kids don't get access to a place like that. And boat wake skating sort of definitely was declining as like that pro wake skate tour was, you know, starting to take off and get legs. And so it's probably just a number of different factors. There's probably like an economic factor. There's probably an access factor, a relatability factor. And yeah, I've had conversations with like Reed and Nick about it before, about just where I think was becoming less relatable to just the average person.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing with those private parks is the level and technicality of wake skating. Shot through the roof.
Through the roof.
Because you're getting so many laps on these
Yep.
private parks with cool features.
Yep.
But
I mean, so much. Like some of my favorite photos are of the guys in those like private parks. You could try all sorts of different things and just keep trying and trying and trying, and you know, different angles, different lighting. But yeah, you in terms of actually relating to the masses and stuff, like how many guys are just going to go try backside bigger flips? You know,
not me.
Right.
Yeah, but boat wake skating, I think, is, I don't know. I'm not going to say it was doomed from the start, but man, you fall a lot trying.
You do. And
tricks.
yeah. And then, so wakeboarding's easier. And then obviously what probably didn't help both wakeboarding and wake skating in terms of growth is wake surfing.
Yeah.
And you can get into super long theoretical conversations about like, has wake surfing actually like killed anything? Has it helped? You know, there's arguments for both sides. I think a lot of the factors actually age. A lot of the guys that are boat buying age now are my age. You know, we're 40 plus. We're the kids that were teenagers in the 90s, that when wakeboarding was badass and we didn't care about hurting ourselves. And extreme sports. Yeah. And now we don't want to be extreme anymore.
A little extreme. And so I've had conversations where, you know, is it actually going to be a generational thing where like, because we grew up doing it, well, and our kids might start doing it, is there actually a chance for another little like wakeboard growth? Yes, I agree with that. That's a great take, I think, and I think that the wake surfing thing, as much as people can dog on it, and I'll dog on it, it's fun to dog on it, it's funny.
Yeah.
But it's still getting people in life jackets behind boats that make killer wakes.
Yes.
That's a lot of fun.
Yes.
So are you going to wake surf growing up and you get super familiar with the water, comfortable, like standing sideways?
Right.
And then maybe now you want a little bit more something that will give you some adrenaline.
Yeah. And I think you could probably even make the argument like a lot of the action sports generation got into it because their parents grew up with ball sports. And they were a lot of the kids that were like forced into like doing a lot of ball sports. Team sports, like, and with serious soccer moms and soccer dads. And well, no, I'm going to go ride my skateboard, or I'm going to like, look at what these cool kids are doing with a snowboard or with a wakeboard now. But then the generation after that is like, well, all those action sports are played out. Like, I'm going to go do something different. Like, what's the new cool thing? And so obviously in the late 90s, early 2000s, action sports were everywhere. They were so mainstream that then they weren't the cool new thing anymore. And so that's why all action sports actually, not only was there the recession of 2008, but then all the action sports just saw a lot of decline in participation. And is it going to be a generational thing for some of those things to tick back up? I'd like to think yes.
Yeah, I'll do what I can to make it happen.
Right.
I mean, kids are dressing like the 90s and early 2000s nowadays anyway, so it's like maybe we're coming full circle.
Yeah.
Let's bring it back to Alliance. So you've spent, how many years did you spend with Alliance?
I worked full-time for Alliance for 11 and a half, almost 12 years.
Okay.
So I started in 2005, and then I was done in December of 16. I started at Wakeboarding Magazine in January of 17.
Okay. So in the heyday, I don't know if you have any idea, but I mean, ad dollars being thrown at that mag had to be pretty high. Who were some big? I mean, do you know any of the numbers? Like,
I don't know ad numbers.
Okay. You were hands off on that part.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and the thing that I learned was that mag dollars, like, Alliance could have strategies with their ad programs because of like pull, or because of having the video department. You know, we had, you know, Keith Kipp and Josh McWilliams and other guys then later on that were like making videos. And then there's the growth of the website. And so you're able to make like package deals. And so it's not just like, oh, I'm going to buy one ad in Alliance. You know, theoretically, like the goal I think for anybody at Alliance was you're trying to get like a partnership for the year. And so here's what we can deliver. You know, if we have this many issues of the magazine, if you want double page spreads, you want the inside cover, but you also, how many banners do you want? Do you want a commercial on pole? You know? So, I mean, obviously money was flowing in those like early 2000 days, because you had brands were everywhere. You know, you had Quicksilver had a team, Billabong had a team, Reef, and every sunglass company, you know, energy drinks. You had Red Bull, Monster, Rockstar. So
a lot of money flowing.
There's money flowing for sure. And I know some of the riders were making some good money off of it, and good for them for doing so.
Yeah, absolutely. Make it what you can. Did you ever work with Brooke Geary?
I did work with Brooke.
Say her last name?
So Brooke had like a heavy snowboard background with, I think it was called Yo Beat.
Yeah.
And then got into like the wake skate scene and became like the wake skate editor for Alliance for a while. And so Brooke was at like all the toe jams, and Brooke was a very talented writer, she still is a talented writer and very funny. And she definitely fit like the sort of like no F's given mold with Alliance. So we even, at one point, we even turned Alliance Wake Skate into its own little like digital magazine. And so she was actually making those, and I think you would like through Zinio or through one of the e-readers. And so she was in charge of like putting those together, and it was just all straight wake skate content. So
was that before Yo Beat? It had to be, right?
No, I think
it was after
or during.
During, okay.
Yeah. And then she brought Yo Beat back.
Yeah.
I think. But
I don't think it's a thing right now, but I think
right.
Started, went back. Yo Beat, for those who don't know, is like a more or less snowboard shit talking kind of website. It was, I don't know if they ever had a mag, but it was
I don't know,
online media.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know if shit talking is the right word, but there was a lot of shit talked. It was funny. It was a great website.
They were pot stirrers.
There you go. That's
pot stirrers.
Pot stirrers is what they were. I love a good pot stirrer.
Yeah.
How many covers did you have? You know that number?
Of Alliance?
Yeah.
I've written it down somewhere. I 30 to 40 or somewhere. Covers of Alliance over the years. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I got to Wakeboarding Mag and was not as focused on photography because I had to oversee some of the titles, and then I was only there for a year before print went away. But then started shooting for Boating Mag, which is one of the bigger magazines under the same publishing group, and got some covers with Boating Mag. But yeah, I don't know. So I don't know how many total covers I've shot now. Maybe 50 magazine covers if you start counting like my boating covers. Yeah. But in terms of actual wake covers, it's probably in the 40.
You gotta be up there then with the most. You know.
I'm probably more than any other photographer, just because I was the staff photographer. So that at some points that's probably like a little bit more of an advantage or unfair, but it's also the nature of like they hired a photographer to be their staff photographer. So there was one period where I think in like 2007, I think in 2007 Alliance was doing 8 or 9 issues a year. And I think I had like 6 or 7 covers in a row, and to the point where I was actually like uncomfortable with it. But I was also like, I felt like I was getting ghosted by like the 2 other main photographers at that point were Josh Letchworth and Joey Maddock, who were legends in my book. And I was ripping like their pictures out of the magazines when I was reading it in high school because I liked the photos. I didn't care about the writer. I was ripping out the photographers' pictures. But I felt like I was getting ghosted, and I couldn't figure out why. And it's like, are they like upset that there's like this kid at this mag now is getting like all these pictures published and but then I come to find out they were in the middle of secretly starting the Standard, which was their quarterly like coffee table style book. And so they had been working and saving all of their stuff to try and like kickstart this project. And so we were like, me and Tony Smith could not figure out why we were like getting so few in 05 we were getting so many submissions, 06, and then
just died off. And
then it just like the submissions weren't coming in like 07 or whenever that string of like covers was. And it was all, a lot of it had to do with Josh and Joey starting the Standard.
So you ran 6, 7, or 8 in a row. It's impressive nonetheless.
Yeah.
Big name sponsors. So we were talking about it a little bit earlier, but what do you think was the catalyst for, some of the exits of these big name sponsors?
I mean, there's a heavy crash for action sports in '08 with that recession. And I mean, and not just action sports. There was a what do they call it? The Great Recession, or no? What did they nickname it? Oh yeah, the Great Recession, because we had the Great Depression.
It wasn't the Great Depression.
It was the Great Recession.
Yeah.
So, the first thing that's going to go is your marketing budget, and a lot of those brands were freely spending their marketing budgets, and getting pretty wild with it. And so, I don't know if there's really any other way to put it, wakeboarding, if you're going to break down wakeboarding numbers wise to some of the other more established board sports, it's probably still one of the smaller ones and
not accessible. So it's tough.
Yeah.
At the mag at that time, 2008 happens. It's a big deal to everyone. A lot of bad stuff happened outside of the boating industry, but do you see like any writing on the wall in terms of like, this is going to be the future's looking way different right now? Or
we knew, I mean, kudos to Bill McCaffrey for steering the ship. Like, I don't think any of us got pay cuts or anything. And I don't know if I ever even I didn't even miss like a paycheck. But we knew like the mag was smaller for sure. There's going to be less pages. And you just have to like buckle up your bootstraps, and just like there's just other ways you have to. Trips become less exotic. Your content becomes a little bit more regionalized,
very local.
Yeah. So, but you focus on it doesn't, just because you can't go somewhere exotic, or you don't have a crazy like travel budget because some brand isn't like doing we're not going to Tahiti with Parks to tow into some waves this year. Oh, like it doesn't mean you can't go do really rad stuff. So like
get creative.
Yeah. And then eventually post recession, actually, some of my favorite trips that actually ended up being some of the more exotic ones, like came, between 2010 and 2014.
Okay. I got a whole little thing on travel. We can probably dive into that a little bit, but other than that, we were talking about Alliance. So you're still there. Alliance is based in California.
Yes.
And you were talking about earlier, I had asked you, why is that Florida's Florida is the wakeboard hub.
Right.
It's in California, and you had a good explanation as to what that was.
So because I had told Bill when Bill first hired me and I was getting ready to move out to Orlando, I told him, I was like, man, I'm super appreciative of this, and I don't want to sound like some like spoiled kid that's not like ready to like dive in head first, but I just want to be upfront with you, and I don't want like there to be like a false expectation or something. But I don't see myself living in Florida more than like 5 years. And he's like, oh no, I get it. Like I didn't want to set up an office in Orlando. That's why I'm here in Encinitas. Like North County, San Diego is gorgeous. And at the time, the Alliance office was 2 or 3 blocks from the beach. It was epic. But I mean, also, I think some of that grew out of Alliance wanting to have a connection to a lot of the big brands that were there at the time. So Southern California was filled with Billabong, Quicksilver, Reef, Body Glove, Oakley, and Spy, and I mean you could go on and on and on, and so many brands are in that Orange County and North County, San Diego, and so that's why Bill had the office there, and then now his family's there. Now his kids are basically pro surfers.
Surfing, yeah.
So.
I was flipping through a ton of these mags. For those who don't know, Garrett brought over pretty much every mag.
Pretty much every
mag. Yeah. So, and most of them Alliance. And I was just flipping through some of these print ads, which is not really a thing anymore,
right?
As we can talk about. But some of them speak. It's almost louder is a weird word to say, but like the creativity that you can put into a print piece to me is really interesting. And I was just curious if you feel the same way about how print can speak very differently to the viewer.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm obviously old school because I grew up with it. And so I'm a firm believer in like the tactile experience and the experience of like sitting down and reading through a magazine and digesting it and looking at it, as opposed to now we're on, a little like 8-inch, whatever this is. And we're just thumb. And, is one video there going to make you pause and watch, and maybe there's some really cool editing? Yeah, like that can happen for sure. But we've definitely, there's part of me that just sort of is sad that tactile experience is, and that's not just with wakeboarding. There's so many magazines that don't exist anymore. And it's, it's the nature of the beast. Things evolve. Making magazines is expensive, and there's a lot easier ways for brands to track their marketing spends now that a magazine is actually you can't get an ROI with a print ad.
Throw a QR code in there and see how many people scan it.
Yeah.
I guess it's a good time to talk about it. I mean, what do you see the future of print media in wakeboarding, but also other board sports is? If there is one.
I've had a theory that print will be sort of like vinyl, where you see artists now releasing records on vinyl again, and vinyl is trendy, and people want to go to thrift shops or vinyl shops and have a nice vinyl collection. But that is a much smaller group than it used to be, right? Or than, the heyday.
Yeah.
So I'd like to think that there might be a market for Wake in terms of a specialized coffee table style quarterly. But I don't know if you're ever going to get like a regular print magazine in Wake.
Yeah. I don't see that happening either. I was just curious your thoughts on that, because right now there's none besides copycats, which I've talked about.
Right.
That's even on a semi-regular basis.
Right.
So I hope it never dies. I think a lot of people feel that way. At least something coffee table style would be awesome.
Yeah.
Thicker, but the money's got to be there, and so we'll see. Transitioning out of Alliance. So you were there for a long time.
Yes.
What was the catalyst to you leaving?
I had an opportunity so wakeboarding is a small industry, and obviously Alliance, back in those days, Alliance and Wakeboarding Mag were competitors. But then for a few years, Kevin Michael was a longtime editor of Wakeboarding Mag, and then Sean Perry became the assistant editor, and then the editor after him, and then Ben Greenwood, when his writing days were done, and who I was really close friends with, became an editor, and then moved over into a publishing and sales role. And then we had always joked about we were now frenemies and stuff. And me and Perry actually used to have some fun being when I was the editor of Alliance and he was at Wakeboarding Mag, we would do, I remember there was one thing we did where we made a fake press release about Kevin Henshaw and Sean Watson, starting their own rap group and talking about how hard life is. And it all stemmed from this was the early days of Instagram. It all stemmed from they were on this epic snowboard trip into the Northwest, and it was just dumping snow. And back in the old days of Instagram, where there were no ads and your feed was just chronological, you open up Instagram and it's just Kevin and Watson just blowing everybody up on their Instagram with these epic snow photos and just talking about how good life is or whatever. And so Sean and I came up with this idea about how to rip on them, and so we came up with a press release and we put it on both the Alliance and Wakeboarding Mag websites. We both dropped it at at noon or something, and we talked about how they're retiring from wakeboarding to pursue this rap group career because life is hard, and they want to talk about the really hard experiences of trying to make it as a wakeboarder.
This had to be somewhere around the same time. Do you remember that Sean Watson video of him on a boat with a bunch of girls?
Probably
had 1 million views or whatever.
Yep, probably about the same time.
It's day in the life.
Just those two. Just those two guys living the real struggle. And I think one quote that we used was Chick-fil-A is not open on Sundays, and that can be hard,
if you don't plan for it. It's really right. Come out of left field,
But so anyway, at one point, Ben and I had joked for a couple of years about hey, how do we find a way to work together? And then he hit me up shortly. My daughter was born in August of 2016, and he hit me up shortly after that and was like, hey, would you actually be interested in potentially working for Bonnier? Bonnier is the publishing group that owned Wakeboarding Mag, it still does. And I said, maybe, yeah. My wife and I had been having a conversation about what's my next step. I'd been at Alliance for a long time, and Alliance is a smaller independent publication, and I'd been the editor now for 5-something years, and there wasn't really a what is next for me. And Alliance is also like the younger magazine. There was part of me that was feeling like, are people that read Alliance maybe tired of Garrett's point of view? Like, do they need to? Does Alliance need a little bit of some
New blood?
new blood? And so I went and got lunch with Benny, and he told me, I think you could become like not just the editor of Wakeboarding Mag, but I think they would create a role for you where you're overseeing like multiple things, and you're like sort of like the water sports guy. And so then I had at the time, he was the editorial director over a certain group of magazines. His name's Sean Bean, great guy. He still works for Bonnier. And so I went to lunch with Sean, and he was like, yeah, there will be an opening at Water Ski Mag and Wakeboarding Mag. And then Boating Magazine, we really want to push some of the water sports brands into boating, because we see that as a good avenue for them. Like if they want to, if Malibu and Mastercraft and whoever else want to try and, they want to try and get buyers from Cobalt or Regal or whoever and bring them into, these water sports boats, go after the boating audience. The Boating Magazine is a huge publication. Yeah. And he's like, so I think it was editorial director of water sports. And so I basically, once I said yes, and started January of 17, I oversaw Wakeboarding Mag, Water Ski Mag, and then any water sports content that went into Boating Magazine. So it was a good move for me, just in terms of the career path. I was moving up from editor to an editorial director, and instead of overseeing one magazine, I'm overseeing two with a heavy hand, or not a heavy hand, but actively involved in a really big magazine. So it was a great career opportunity. And then Bonnier's a bigger brand, so there's bigger benefits, and I've got a kid now, and got to start working on that 401k, and so it was still a very hard decision for me to make. I'm a very like loyal guy. Obviously, if I'm at a place like Alliance for more than a decade, and that conversation with Bill, when I had to tell him, like was hard, but it was never like an F you, you're going to the enemy. Like it was very cool. Like we all realized, like me, Bill, and Corey Murata, all realized that like we had done a lot together, and I'd put in a lot and given a lot to Alliance. And new blood is not a bad thing for a brand like Alliance. And so, and they knew that where I was in life and like with my family and stuff, that this was like an opportunity that I probably couldn't pass up. So that's how that all came about. And it actually, it worked out like really well.
So who followed you up at Alliance? Who was kind of like behind you? That was
Bradley Rutledge. So Bradley Rutledge was, I think we hired him as like he was a kid that started sending in photos a few years prior, and really good photographer. And definitely he fit the Alliance mold for sure. Like in terms of just like, not really, no real F's given. Got some
unconventional.
Got some opinions on the sport, and doesn't need to be like super corporate. And then so then he worked under me for a couple years, I think, and we had a ton of fun working together. I still keep in touch with Bradley. He's a rad guy. But then so he became the editor. I think he did that for like a year, and then he moved on to doing his own thing. And then I think he was followed by Jeff Mathis, who I think you just interviewed, right?
Yep, I did.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, so new blood following after you, and it wasn't like there was a tough transition for Alliance, at least after you left. It seems like
they just had to
Rutledge was kind of ready to.
Yeah. Rutledge had been there
step
behind me, and they kept making mags. And then I was thrown to the wolves because I was immediately I started in January, and we had a deadline, and the first issue had to be off to the printer, I want to say in like 8 or 10 weeks. And there was some content had been created, but not a lot. And then I remember in February, Ben's second son was born. So I'd been there for like a month. And then Ben's second son was born. And so he was gone for, like a week or something. And I was just like, whoo! But we also had to work on, there's multiple other things to work on. There's water sports content for boating. And there is a spring issue of Water Ski Magazine. And we need to get some, we had hired out a guy to be like the acting editor of Trent Finlayson. We hired him out to be the acting editor of Water Skiing. So he was overseeing a lot of the content that was being created. And then I was just then helping work with him. But yeah, that was a wild
Hectic
start. I want to say that I think I made an Instagram post, but I want to say like in 10 weeks we put out like an issue of wakeboarding and I think the water ski, and then shortly after that, like a wake surfer. And by the time we were at like 12 or like 14 weeks, it was wild. We were firing, but that crew was awesome. We actually, I just got together with them for the first time in a long time. But so when I got to Wakeboarding Mag, Benny G was the publisher, who was awesome to work with because he was one of my longtime friends from his pro riding career. Emily Dale was the deputy editor. And so she worked with me and like ran all the digital and stuff, and worked to help make every mag. And then Mike Forrest was the art director, and super creative, talented guy. And we all haven't seen each other. Like we haven't been together as a group in years. And we just had a barbecue like on Saturday night at Benny's house, went swimming in the pool and had beers and let the kids run around and play in the pool. And it was fun to catch up with them and see how well everybody's doing. But that was a
solid squad.
Solid squad.
Yeah.
And we only got 1 year of print, that 2017 was the 1 year of print that we got to do, but we were really proud of like the issues of wakeboarding that we created. It meant a lot to me to get to oversee that franchise, having grown up with it, like I started subscribing to it in 95 or 96. And also to oversee, Water Ski Magazine was down to like 2 issues a year. So we did two issues of Water Ski that year in 17, but did do a redesign. So Mike Forrest did this awesome redesign that I still love to this day. And I really liked like the directions that we tried to take Water Ski, and to be able to, even though it was a very small impression, to like be able to say like, hey, I had an impression on these magazines that I grew up reading. My dad subscribed to Water Ski since before I was born. So even though I don't have like a water ski background, to just at least to try and get to put a little bit of my stamp on that was cool and fun.
Yeah, take water skiing in a direction that isn't just back and forth.
Right. Yeah, what we tried to do was actually make the Water Ski Magazine a little less core and a little more like family friendly.
Okay.
So we hired Travis Moy from boarding school fame, he wrote an article about how he taught his daughters how to water ski. So as opposed to like how to take, an extra length off your rope around and get, make sure you're getting ball 4, and tune you. Instead of like the buoy head stuff, we tried to make it a little more family. And he did a really cool article. Bill Doster shot the photos of his daughter learning to water ski. And I still reference that, or I'll send that link to people. That article is still online. And so I'll send it to people if they're like looking to get their kids up. It's a great tips.
Okay. Before you said you had a year of print with them after you started?
Yeah, I think 2017.
Okay. And why does that stop?
Finances, probably. I don't think Wakeboarding Mag was even generating a ton of revenue on its own. And if you need advertisers to make a mag. Subscribers, having a lot of subscriptions, $12.99 a year or whatever, or $10.99 for a year of mags, isn't going to help you print a mag. It really comes down to your subscribers and, or not.
Your ad dollars,
it comes down to your ad dollars. Yeah. And so, there was not a lot of brands putting much money or energy into supporting Wakeboarding Mag or Alliance now. And, so I'm sure the decision was made. And actually, kudos to the people at Bonnier that have been there for a long time and actually see the value in Wakeboarding Mag and water sports, and actually how water sports can be a part of Boating Mag, and really working to keep Wakeboarding Mag going. I'm sure the argument could have been made to pull the plug well before I got there in terms of print.
Totally axe it. Okay.
Yeah, just make it a digital thing.
Yeah.
So,
is that tough? Did you see it coming at all?
I think we sort of knew that. We didn't see it coming as quickly as it came. I knew that once I was leaving Alliance, I'm not naive to the transition of media. Yeah. I have many friends that I studied with in college that actually went the newspaper photojournalism route that don't even have a job in that industry. That almost like doesn't even exist anymore. And so I knew that I was on borrowed time, probably like staying in the print world. I knew that like the niche markets would probably last a little bit longer than like a mainstream like newspaper, because people would still, well, I still want my magazine about cars, or I still want my magazine about, you know, home design, or, you know, or I still want my wakeboarding magazine. So I felt like I was probably a little bit more protected being in a niche like that. But I also knew that media changes rapidly now, especially with social media and just the evolution of video blogging and YouTubing and the internet. And so I think maybe I thought I had like a little bit more than a year, but I got a year.
I mean, that's kind of a bummer, right? Because like you described it, the team is going to shrink, right? Because it's less.
So when print went away in January of 18, Mike Forrest and Emily Dale both lost their jobs because there wasn't a magazine to work on anymore, which was a huge bummer.
Okay. So when that's ending, what is your role? I mean, it's probably shifting a little bit more towards digital side.
Yeah.
Like, how's that changing for you?
So when that shift was made, there was also a large layoff across Bonnier as a corporation. And because Bonnier at the time had 10 or 15 magazines, they had like Field and Stream and Outdoor Life up in New York, and some other stuff. And so there was some corporate layoffs and some restructuring. Quite a few people at the Orlando office here lost their jobs. One of those was longtime staff photographer Bill Doster, who is a legend in my book. He's another one of the guys whose pictures I used to rip out of the mags. I never got to work with Bill that much because he was always the staff photographer for Wakeboarding Mag, and I was always the staff photographer for Alliance. But we were always friendly and stuff. And so I was really bummed when he got let go. But after that happened, they asked me if I would start writing more for Boating Magazine, and not just water sports content, but also just anything sort of like general boat. And I was totally open to that because I like boats and I like being on the water, and the water sports niche is very small when you look at how big the actual like boating world is. And I was like, yeah, I'd be interested in like learning some more about how other boats work and what makes like this industry tick even more. So I started writing more for boating, and then also doing like more photo shoots for boating. So that was part of that transition, but then I was still just running anything Wakeboarding Mag related. So all the website content, social media. And then I was trying to come up with different active ways to make the Wakeboarding Mag still has a very strong, I think 150,000, 130,000 something followers.
Yeah, I tried to buy it.
Yeah.
But no bites.
No, didn't get any replies on that email.
No, I've sent Wakeboarding Mag Instagram handle a lot of messages over the day to the guy who was probably before you when you were there and whoever's there now. But anyways, continue.
Yeah. So I was trying to find like just different like ways to get wakeboard content out there that wasn't print. And that some of that was even taking like different departments from the magazine and just finding ways to like digitize them, make them like can I make a story out of this, you know, or can I turn this into a poll and have like the Instagram people like make a poll. Yeah.
Okay. Transitioning into some more boating side of things, which is probably pretty exciting for you. You spent ton of your life in just the water sports.
Yeah.
What is Lake X like?
Lake X. So Lake X is a lake here, and I never even knew this existed, but Lake X was you could call it like a skunk works for Mercury Marine, you know, one of the biggest engine manufacturers. And Mercury was started, I think, in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin or Michigan. But at any rate, so Mercury wanted to, back in like the 40s or 50s, when they wanted to be like very secretive about their technology, and they didn't. I've been told that there were times where some of the engine manufacturers, like maybe this is like Evinrude and Mercury, and I forget who some of the other ones are, but would potentially try and like spy on each other and see what they were making. And so the owner of Mercury bought a ton of property down here in Florida this is pre-Disney. There's nothing out in like Orlando but orange groves. And so this is probably maybe 45 minutes, hour south of Orlando, but bought this bunch of land with a lake on it and started building a basic home. I don't think there was a factory, but there are buildings like warehouse style buildings, but on the water. And they did their mercury testing down here. And there's they built this tower like on the edge of the lake, and that was their watchtower for like timing like different engines as they're doing laps around the lake. And so it was Lake X was Mercury's skunk works. It was their test site for doing stuff for years and years and years. And then it was sold to a conservation group that still actually runs and maintains the land now. And but Mercury has now come to an agreement with them. So right when I started at boating, I guess Mercury came to an agreement with the conservation group. Like they had still had a relationship, and they will do like media events at Lake X now. So they'll invite a bunch of the media out when they're doing like a product launch, and then they'll be there with a bunch of their partners. So you can get, like, so let's say Mercury's coming out with like a new outboard, and okay, you want to go test this outboard on a pontoon. Here's this boat. You want to go test it out on a center console. Here's this boat. Here's a day cruiser. And so you'll probably have 10 to 12 different boats with all outfitted with like the newest engine. And so then all the different media members can get on with a rep from that boat company or from Mercury and go test drive it around the lake. And I got to go to one where I got to go into I can't remember the name of the boat or the manufacturer, but it's a cat style race boat, had twin Mercury racing engines on it. And I got to drive, and we were doing like 110 miles an hour. Jeez. And it was awesome.
Anything over like 50, 60 in a boat is just
so fast. It's
insane.
so fast. And that boat was so smooth. And I remember he wouldn't let me touch the throttle. I was allowed to hold the steering wheel, but I couldn't touch the throttle. And we just shot across this lake. And then I remember like we were getting towards the end. He's like, all right, you can start banking into a turn now. And I look over and like, we're still doing 70. And I'm like, you want me to turn now? But the way these cat holes are designed, like it just tracks. It's just, and it was so bizarre and wild and cool.
Okay, so you're still doing photography though for Boating Mag, right?
Yes.
Like
I still do.
A lot of cool photography. You're getting up in helis probably quite often?
Yeah, a few times a year at least.
Okay.
So Boating Magazine, all of their covers are of a new boat shot from a helicopter. The boat is the star, which was different for me actually coming from the wakeboard background where you're the athlete and the trick of the star. And so, but they always just want to be able to see a tight shot of the boat running and give the viewer like in a helicopter, then you're seeing inside the boat. And so, yeah, let the boat be the star and get up in a helicopter and shoot it. And it's a super fun way to shoot photos. It's not the most creative, like at times, you send the boat, make sure the light's pointing in the right direction that you want, send the boat that way, have the helicopter follow it. It's super fun. But yeah, it's
sometimes
different.
You don't have to overthink it.
No, just
beautiful boat with beautiful water.
Yeah.
Let's let do the talking.
Right.
Any close calls with photography in general? I mean, I know you've probably been in the water a lot, chased boats, helicopters.
I'm lucky that I've had very few. There was one time, the closest call I ever had to actually really hurting myself was shooting with Trevor Hansen and Ben Greenwood when they both rode for Team Supra. And this is back in 07, 08. And Supra at the time had a tower that sort of had a forward slope to it and had like two bars at the top with one towards the bow, like a little bit lower than the one behind it. And I wanted to sit up there and get like a different angle. And so, I climb up. And then we start going, and Benny G's driving the chase boat, and it's just me and him in the boat. I'm sitting up there. Fortunately, I have my camera strap around my neck, but I'm sitting up there taking pictures of Trevor, and we get to the end of the lake. We're going to start making a turnaround, and Ben looks, because we're obviously going to go over some rollers. He's like, are you good? You're holding on? I'm like, yeah, I'm good, but you're always in a little bit of a forward lean when you're sitting up there on that tower because of the way it was shaped. And the way Ben took those rollers just happened to, it was slow. We weren't going fast. Like Ben was being super cautious, but we just got pitched enough to where we went up and then down, and it started pushing me then more forward. And I feel myself sliding. And so my eyes are now looking at the top of the windshield, and my face is falling straight to the top of the windshield, and I don't have my hands down. So I somehow, and I don't even know how I instinctively did this, but I reached my hands behind me and actually caught the bar of the tower, and I'm swinging with a reverse grip over. My camera is now banging like the windshield, and my eyes are probably like this far from it. And it's all slow-mo to Ben. I remember Ben like seeing me start to like pitch, and he's down in the driver's seat and goes, "Oh shit." And he's like he tries to like put his hands up to like grab me, but I'm falling so fast, and like it was wild. And we had to like take a little break and be like, dude, you almost just ate a windshield. Like it would actually, had I fallen straight, I would have caught it with just my face and not had anything to break my fall, and I would have just had like the edge of the windshield like in my grill.
That'll hurt.
I've definitely had close calls where I'm the photographer in a chase boat, and we've almost hit people.
Go into that. I mean, anything specific?
Early on, there was one time where chase boat driver got a little bit stuck in the if you get a chase boat like too close to the wash of the towboat, and you're behind them, but you're not directly behind them, you can sort of like get a little bit of a lock, and you don't have as much turning power. And so Daniel Dowd was a rider, and he fell, and the way he fell, like he sort of like cut back in a little bit, like right into the wake, and then like lost the handle, and we were like sort of in that trough, that landing trough area, and the driver didn't have enough time, like didn't react quickly enough, and Daniel actually was able to kick his board around, and like his board hit the like I remember the thump of it hitting out. I was freaking out. But then like we look back and like he pops up and he's just like, "Oh shit, that was a close one." We're like, "Dude, we just hit you with a boat."
Oh my God.
Yeah. That was definitely the closest. There was one time, actually we joke about it still to this day, the Hanson brothers, Reed has almost hit Trevor while I'm taking pictures while I'm the photographer a couple times. There was one time we were on a trip in Ireland, and
going to this trip in Ireland, because I was going to bring that up.
So I was on I think this was for an episode of Pull, but we did back in the day. This is probably 2007. I did a trip with the Supra team again. So Benny G, Trevor, Reed Hansen, Josh Sanders, and yeah, we did a trip to Ireland and met up with like a dealer up there, and he took us all over to different spots, and some hilarious stories from that trip. But our chase boat at one of our locations was like a rib boat. It's like the rubber ones with like an outboard engine. It looks like something
like a dinghy or whatever.
Yeah, but bigger than a dinghy. Like it's almost something that you see like the seals like beaching on shore.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
And so yeah, like a little rib boat, and Trevor fell, and Reed's driving it, and I mean we went right past Trevor. And like where like I made eye contact, and it's just this like, oh, like this might be really bad, but fortunately it wasn't. It was just a narrow miss. And so Trevor and Reed and I still laugh about how Reed's almost killed him a couple times.
Brotherly love.
But it's always been worth it for the shot. But
well, yeah, he's not dead.
Ireland was a fun one.
Anything else from that Ireland trip?
I mean, just like the one of the funniest was me and Ben and Trevor were dead set on going to like an authentic Irish pub, and we weren't in any of like the big cities. So the first town we started in, like near where the dealership was, is called Birr, Birr, and so we're staying at this little hotel, and all the buildings are like connected, like as it's old 1500s or whatever these buildings are, and so and the pubs have like big wooden doors and like little windows and like curtains, and so there's no real way to like see like, is this a pub that I want to go in? Is this going to be a friendly pub? Like we were psyching ourselves out a little bit. Like what if like we walk in and the locals just think obviously we're going to be just a bunch of American idiots, but like do we want to be the American idiots in this Irish pub? So we finally like, okay, we're gonna go into this one. We're gonna go into this pub, and we walk in, and there's like 4 old guys in like their wool suits, driver caps, like just 4 old Irish guys, and then it's somewhat younger bartender, but super friendly. Like, oh, hey laddies, come on in. Can I get you a pint? And like we're like, yes, you can get us a pint. And so the 3 of us sit down, and because Josh Sanders wasn't with us yet. His flight got delayed coming from Australia, so he was stuck. And then Reed was probably asleep, and definitely probably not interested. At that time, Reed is probably 15 or 16. Super young. So the three of us go and sit down, and of course, like the old guys are kind of eyeing us up, like, who are these guys? And then they hear us talking, and one of them, comes over and wants to start chatting us up. And, oh, so I can tell you guys aren't from around here. Where are you from? And so we get into this full conversation with this guy, and start telling him, we're from Florida, and we're doing here wakeboarding. Florida, if it's pretty nice. It's June, yeah. Florida's pretty nice this time of year, pretty warm, eh? Yeah. What the hell are you doing in Ireland? And because it's like, it's cold in Ireland and rainy. And then at one point, so he just brings us over, and we just start having this conversation with these guys, and they're picking our brains about this, that, and the other. And then the sort of like the leader of the group is like, but in Florida, you got all them alligators in Florida, don't you? Right? You got all them alligators. I'm like, yeah, we got a lot of alligators. And he looks over at his older buddies and goes, now, do you guys know the difference between an alligator and a crocodile? And we're just like, where is he going with this? And he goes, well, I'll tell you. An alligator, he closes his mouth like this, and a crocodile, he closes his mouth like that. And Trevor goes, oh, I'm sorry, sir, but I don't think that's right. And, oh, shut the fuck up, laddie. You're ruining my joke. We tell jokes over here in Ireland, laddie.
It's a great accent you got there.
Thanks. That's probably the only one I can legitimately do.
So you picked the right pub, is what it sounds like.
We did. We picked the right pub. We had a great time in Birr, Ireland, and later that, I don't know if it was that night or the next night, legit bar fight, which was hilarious. So Josh had joined us at this point in time. He's wearing his Red Bull hat, and we're at a pub that is very friendly to our dealer. Like, he knows the people that run the pub, or they're regulars there. And some younger local kids start harassing Josh about his Red Bull hat. Oh, give me your hat. Like, you get them for free. Give me your hat. And this is back in the day when Red Bull hats were only given to team athletes.
Is it still that way? I think it's still that way.
I think it basically is.
Because I tried to wear Massey's hat once, wouldn't happen. Parks' hat wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
It's pretty strict about that stuff.
I think they are still very strict about what athletes do with their hats.
Yeah.
And so Josh was just I'm sorry, man, but this is my biggest sponsor, and it's a paycheck, and I have to keep track of these. I can't mess around with this. I can't give them away. And so then obviously, beers are being drunk, and smack is being talked. Oh, give me your fucking, give me. And we, our dealer had this one big friend, this huge human, and who I don't even remember his name, but we called him Birdie. His nickname was Birdie. Oh, Birdie. And so Birdie comes up and flicks this guy. He's like, fuck off, you twat. Leave him alone. He's not gonna give you the fucking hat. And
Flicks him.
Yeah. And so then these kids start mouthing off to Birdie, and some punches get thrown, and bartender's like, oh, we aren't having any raucous in here. Take it outside. Take it outside. And a legit, everybody leaves the bar because they want to see the fight, and a circle forms in the little street outside of this little pub, and these guys start going into fisticuffs, just squaring up each other, just pop, 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 pop. And Josh and I are, a few deep at this point, and he looks at me and he's like, "There's a bar fight in Ireland over my Red Bull hat. I just flew in from Australia. I'm tripping. We got to get out of here." And so he and I walked back to where we were staying.
Hell of a story, though. Yeah, wow. All over a Red Bull hat.
Mm-hmm.
Let's stay on travel now. I feel like this is a good kind of time to dive into that. Wakeboarding has obviously taken you a bunch of cool places.
Yeah, I've been very lucky.
And I got a couple listed here, but in your opinion, what are some of the coolest places you've been?
Tahiti's up there for sure. We went there to work on the Parks documentary. Alliance was making that video with Red Bull, and so Parks had been there before to try towing into waves, and actually that ran as a cover of one of the, I think it's the first year of Alliance. We can look, but there's Parks is getting towed into a wave, and that sort of thought process and how to attack it was changed rapidly over a few years. And so we actually had, for that trip, we had a surf shaper take Parks and Danny's boards and then shape them out of surf foam, so that you would be more buoyant on the wave and actually have a little more push, and you weren't as reliant on. So you could theoretically then, actually get towed in and let go of the rope.
Yeah.
When Parks first did it on his regular wakeboard, like he had to keep holding onto a rope, and that puts the jet ski in a super sketchy position to be like where the wave is breaking and stuff. So, and just makes it more complicated. So we actually went to Chopu, and which is like a legendary surf break, and we caught it on a day where some locals were there paddling in, but it was pretty much just us. And so it was still like Parks and Danny were able to like get barreled. It wasn't like a huge day, but it was just such a cool, surreal experience to be at that wave, at that break, and in that like paradise setting. And you're just watching Danny and Parks just play. Like we were all freaking out. It was so fun. And we were there for a long time because we wanted to try and catch a window of when we might get a little bit of swell so we could hit up Chopu. And when we weren't there, we were just hitting some smaller breaks around other parts of the island. They knew a guy that had a boat there. It was a direct drive Mastercraft, but with a tower. And so we would put some weight in it and then like stay inside the reef and go find like a flat zone and just like wakeboard. Super fun trip. So Tahiti's up there for sure. I did a trip to South Africa that was with Oakley when they were filming Push Process. That was very cool. Went to Thailand filming LF and Awesome, Thai Wake Park, Daniel Grant's stomping grounds. That was a fun trip. Did Italy with Mossy, which was epic. Let's see what.
You went to Newfoundland, right?
I did.
That
was also. I did also go to Newfoundland, Canada for the Parks documentary.
So could the boys have racked boardies that day, or didn't have to go full suit?
No, they were in dry suits. The water was like 40 something.
Okay.
So it was June. I think it was June. So it was Adam Arrington and Josh Sanders and Parks, 3 Red Bull athletes, and we were. I forget who actually had the harebrained idea. It might have been one of the Red Bull reps. But then, looking at these, basically what happens is on the east coast of Canada, icebergs break off of Greenland and start coming down the coast and will eventually then beach themselves, because what's the phrase? Like the top third and is above water and then like the other 2/3 is below water.
Yeah.
So they run deep. And so they can get beached a decent ways away from shore. And then sometimes they'll just start melting and make like a shape, little ramp that you can slide across. And so they had scouted well before, found 2 near St. John's, Newfoundland. And the first one we started at was a smaller one, and I got a cover photo of Parks sliding across that one. And then the second one was huge, and there was like multiple like walls to it. I mean, it looked like an office building. And we hit that for a while. And then actually the crazy part of that was we'd been told like, hey, if something slides off, we have to be ready to, like, if this thing like breaks in half, you got to be ready to jet out because it can create like a big wave and like overtake the boat.
Yeah.
And so we had this paranoia going to the second one about like, and some of it were pretty sheer vertical walls. And we were like, holy cow, this one's big. And you can, the whole time, this is an actively melting thing. You can hear water like running off of it. And every now and then you'll hear a big pop of like some ice releasing. It almost sounds like a thunderclap. Super bizarre, like really cool to get up close to an iceberg, but also very bizarre. And you just like hear stuff cracking, and the guys would get like, sometimes like be tentative about hitting parts, but you get into a flow. We got some cool photos of that second one. And then we hear a big, we're in, nobody's riding. Josh is sitting on one jet ski. I think Parks is on the other. And we're in like our photo boat, and hear big crack and see just part of it shear off. We're like, oh crap. And then our local like guide is like, we got to get out of here. Run. We don't know how big this wave's going to be. We got to get out. And so like everybody starts like flooring it just to get a distance from this iceberg. And Josh panics and sucks up the rope into the jet ski. So he's like waving back at us like, come get me. And so like we bust back and get him, and we're like, we don't know what's going to happen. But actually nothing ended up happening. It didn't.
The way it fell,
the way it fell, it made like a little push.
Roller.
Didn't make like a breaking like wave that'll overtake a boat. But that was definitely like freaky. But the shut it down party that night was totally worth it because we're in St. John's, Newfoundland, which is this tiny little town, and Red Bull has rented out a bar to have this like epic like send-off party because there was quite a few people involved in this production in terms of scouting and helping like coordinate things and shuttling. Some of them we had to drive a decent distance to get to some of these, and then hop on boats, and boats had to get towed, jet skis had to get towed.
And there's video from this too, right?
Yeah,
so
it's all in the parks documentary. Yeah, so there's videographers, but for that we brought home. We had empty ice chests with us, and we filled them with iceberg ice and brought them back to the bar. And all the drinks that night were served with iceberg ice.
That's super awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we probably should finish up with Wakeboarding Mag. I know we got way off track there, but is there anything you want to touch on there at the end of Wakeboarding Mag? Your time spent there?
No, like I thoroughly enjoyed getting to be part of that franchise, and I wish that there was a little bit more time to make mags. Yeah, absolutely. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles, and you just sort of have to roll with it. I'm very fond of had I not had my 4 years at Bonnier and gotten more plugged into Boating Magazine, I wouldn't be in the position I am now to be able to like work for myself and have some of the relationships and contacts that I have. So including but I still do a lot of work for Boating Magazine, which in turn also turns into some work for like wakeboarding. So they're sort of like they're basically under the same umbrella, and I'm super grateful for it.
You don't run the Instagram account though, do you?
I do not run the Instagram account.
So let's dive into what you are currently doing.
Okay.
So you work. Just run me through what you do right now.
Yeah, so I work for myself, but it's because I have so many years of contacts in water sports, I'm still very connected to that industry. The main being Liquid Force. I've known all the guys at Liquid Force for a long time, and when I was starting my own thing, they were one of the first groups I hit up, and it was shortly thereafter that then they brought me on. I run their social media and do their photography. So I've done that it'll be 2 years in October. And there's some other things I help with, like their newsletters now. They're making a push for more regular like e-news blasts. And but the LF crew is just an awesome crew. I've known like Don Wallace forever, and Aaron Grace. Aaron's not there anymore, but Aaron.
Oh, he isn't?
No, Aaron Grace is not at LF.
I didn't
anymore.
know that.
And so, but I've known both those guys since. I mean, Don hired me when I was in college to shoot photos of Emily Copeland, now Emily Copeland Durham. She was a team writer for LF. So I had just had my first photos published in Alliance, and Dawn needed photos of Emily on 2003 product, but she grew up and rode mainly in Denver, and there was no wake photographers there. And Bill McCaffrey told Dawn, well, there's this kid that goes to school at Boulder, and we just published some of his photos. Like, you should hit him up and see if he'll shoot with Emily. And so, shout out to Bill and Don for hitting me up. I got this voicemail from Don. Hey, Garrett, my name's Don Wallace. I'm the marketing team manager for Liquid Force, and I don't know if you've ever heard of Emily Copeland, but I need some photos of her, and she lives in Denver, and Bill gave me your number, blah, blah, blah. So I've known Don since like 2002, and he paid me to go shoot photos of Emily, which I was like, holy cow, I'm totally in now. I'm totally in. I've got a photo in Alliance, and I'm getting paid to shoot Emily Copeland. This is awesome. And I ended up, I shot Don's wedding. I think Don got married in like 2008 or 9 or something. But yeah, so I was Don's wedding photographer. But so the LF crew is awesome. So I do a lot for them. I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of work for Super and Moomba the last couple of years, and work with their team on their marketing campaigns for their new boats. Still do a lot of work for Boating Mag. And what's fun is that because I was like the editor of the mag and I have some writing skills, I've still been able to do some of that in this. I'm not just like doing photography with my own business. So I can write stuff for boating. Boating still hires me a lot to do like walkthrough videos on the new wake boats. So I'll get out on one of the new Malibus or Axis or whatever and be like, oh, I'm Garrett Cortese. I'm here with Gunther Oka on the brand new Axis, whatever, and do a walkthrough video. So it's fun. It still keeps me connected to obviously a industry that I've spent my career in and that I I grew up on a boat. I love being on a boat. So I'm very happy to still be able to find a way to make a living doing that.
100%. So, I mean, it's probably pretty straightforward, but compare and contrast working with two brands and then now splitting off on your own. And how you make that transition.
Day to day is much different. I don't have regular deadlines anymore. And there's definitely some super crazy periods, like where I have like multiple shoots stacked up. And then there's actually slow months. It works out great with Liquid Force because I'm on a retainer with them. And so because I am running their social media and doing other things with the marketing team, I'm doing something LF related almost daily. But then there's like the month of May, I was gone the entire month of May this past year. First week of May was Liquid Force boat shoot at Lake Martin, Alabama. Second week was Lake Tellico, Tennessee for Moomba boats. Third week was Liquid Force park shoot in Germany and Belgium and the Netherlands with the park team. And then fourth week was back here in Orlando with Supra, but I'm on the water before sunrise and out until after sunset every day. So the month of May was nuts. I saw my wife and daughter minimally. But kudos to my wife because she's fully supportive and actually one of the biggest benefits for us in the way like we've sort of set up our like family life is my wife works full time, super talented creative director for a digital design company in New York, and so she's grinding. She works hard all day, every day. She's on a ton of Zoom calls, and so then me having my own business gives our family the flexibility to I can be Mr. Mom. I do drop off at school in the morning, can do pickup afterwards, and can sort of like set my schedule to help our family life and be around and do some of that, which I enjoy and am grateful for. So
very flexible.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. So it's definitely different than the mag life for sure.
Let's dive into some funny pieces of content from over
Yes.
the years. So kind of did a lot of the life story of Garrett. I think we can get into some more wakeboard industry, all sorts of good fun stuff.
Have at it.
So we talked about this earlier, but one of the funniest pieces of content that you told me about was the eat 7 cheeseburgers and spin a 7.
Yeah.
Just run through that whole story.
Okay, so living with Jeff while Jeff was still a pro rider, and then at some point, maybe a year or two after moving in with Jeff, he took on like the comedy department. Alliance had always had this just sort of goofball comedy department, and whoever was running it would give it a different name at the time. And I think Jeff named his the Dustpan, because Jeff was always cleaning. Jeff's just a bit of a neat freak.
Really?
Yeah.
For some reason, that surprises me.
No, yeah. Jeff is a busybody. Jeff can't sit still. If Jeff's sitting still, he's falling asleep. So, Jeff would always like when I lived with Jeff, like running the vacuum or like sweeping stuff up like multiple times a day. And so Jeff named it the Dustpan because he was always just picking up his dustpan and like brushing shit into it. And he's like, let's just come up with some shit and put it in the dustpan. So, and Jeff was always thinking of really just funny things to get wakeboarders to do. And one of them was, what if I make them eat 7 cheeseburgers from McDonald's and then have to go out and spin a 720? And I was like, yeah, it's a great idea. And I think the first, so he did that, super funny. And I think the first guys to do it were Clay Fletcher, Kevin Henshaw, and Jeff House, maybe. And then it was over a year later, maybe even like 2 years later, or maybe even more than that. But then at some point that came back up, and it's funny that you just had Rusty on. I don't think this came up in the conversation.
No, I didn't know it was a thing.
Yeah, Rusty. So Rusty, is competitive as all get out, and at some point it comes up, and he's like, "You should eat 9 cheeseburgers, spin a 9. I'll dominate that." And Jeff's like, "I'm sure you would. Let's do it." And so we got Rusty, Ollie Jerome, and Phil Sovin, and it turned into eat 9 cheeseburgers, spin a 9. And on the way to, I forget whose house we were doing it at or whose boat we were using, but on the way there, you know, Jeff and I are stopping to get all these burgers, and Jeff's trying to do the math in his head. We're at the McDonald's drive-thru. He's like, all right, I got 3 guys. I need like, and then right next door to the McDonald's is a White Castle. And Jeff's like, wait, no. I need 9 cheeseburgers for 2 people. I'm like, why? And he's like, White Castle's right here. They've got mini burgers. And so then we roll over there and we get 9 mini cheeseburgers for Ollie.
For those who don't know, Ollie is a shorter fella.
Ollie is one of the shorter wakeboarders you'll ever meet. One of the biggest heart, short in stature. I love Ollie. And so, that was so funny. All 3 of those guys. Actually, Ollie might not have puked because his burgers were not nearly as big. But, yeah, Rusty and Phil definitely. There's photos we can pull up from the archive.
So how's that work? Do you eat 9 cheeseburgers and then you immediately go out and do 9? So who won?
It was whoever could land a 9 first, I think. And it might have been Phil. I can't remember.
Probably was Phil.
We can find it in the mag.
Yeah, okay, closed-toed boots. When those first were coming out, there was a race that you guys held.
Yes.
Yeah, what's the story behind that?
That was literally just these boots look like some of that actually. Some of that also stemmed from the Gear Guide. So we had a running gag with Gear Guide that even started from, I think, before my time or right when I started. I remember we did a photo shoot, maybe my first year working for the mag. Josh Letchworth was the photographer, and they wanted Alliance used to have Gear Guides where you would take a picture of an athlete with their board and then talk about that board. But we would always come up with different ways to like shoot the athlete with the board. And so Tony had the idea to do baseball cards. And so we had a photo shoot at a baseball field of guys like running, like while holding their boards, and they're wearing like these like ridiculous outfits, or like throwing on the mound, but the board is propped up next to them, sliding into like second, like I think Parks was like sliding headfirst into like second base, like, and it's a wakeboard or something. And those were super funny. And so we kept on coming up with goofy themes. One year we did prom. And so everybody came as prom dates, and we rented out like a room and with a DJ, and we would make a Gear Guide party out of it, and everybody would, you know, consume adult beverages and have a good time. And we would set up a photo shoot like during it. So we had like the prom photo shoot. I did one with Jeff called the Denim and Leather Get Together. And it was all, you had to come as like an 80s rock star and just, you know, bleach your hair or wear just denim and leather. And we set up like rock stations with photos. Like me and Jason Lee had 2 different photo stations, and we're just shooting guys partying with their next year's gear. So we did multiple of those. And then one year we started shooting guys doing exactly what you would never do with some of your product. And one of those was racing in wakeboard boots, because they started to look like shoes. Yeah. And so we had like 6 guys like so it was probably one guy from each brand. So there's like, you know, Benny G and like some Ultra Suctions, and Danny Harf and some Ronix, whatever they're called. And some Hyperlight, you know, So yeah, basically just line guys up on a field and tell them to run.
Love that goofy shit.
Yeah. We used to, Jeff kept that so lighthearted. There were so many funny ones that we did over the years. There was one, how long can a photographer hold onto a tube with his water housing? And so, you know, it was a contest for like me and Jason Lee and some other photographers, and we'd be out on a tube, and Jeff was actively trying to get us off of the tube.
How long did you last?
I don't remember. Probably not long.
Well, yeah, Jeff's driving, probably not. Boat covering championships. Were you around for that?
Yes, the boat covering championships took place at the Projects, which is now the boarding school. I think that was McKee and some guys that worked there at the times. I think it was Keith Lidberg and Rob Jakes, if I remember right. Maybe one of the other kids that was there too. And how quickly could you cover a boat? And Jeff sat there with a timer. And I think we were using like Nautique, or the Projects had like a Super Air Nautique at the time. And so funny, just so funny, because these guys, I mean, you had to carry it from a certain point. Okay. And then I think Jeff set it up to where the boat was beached and not on the dock. So you had to like wait out a little bit and like these guys were diving into the boat and just trying to uncover it. And then like, you know, it'd get to a certain point and somebody, they're scrambling to get out like a certain hole. And like, what's the strategy? Like, am I going to come back out the bow? Am I go out the back? Like tie everything up and like, you know, ratchet it down. Those were a good one. Jeff came up with like the bat. We started doing like a bass fishing tournament that had to be man powered. So you had to come to the projects, the boarding school. is 3 private lakes, and epic fishing.
Really?
Oh, dude, huge bass.
Didn't know
so yeah, and so we would show up, and you would have to bring something that you could go out into one of the lakes on, but it had to be man powered. So like, and you could be a team of, I think 2, like Colin Harrington and Clay Fletcher came in a canoe one year. Byerly and George Daniels, so smart. They came with 2 paddle boards, and then one of the tubes that you can blow up that was looked like a couch. You know, it's got like a full back.
Yeah.
So they put this on top of 2 paddle boards, and so they're just like cruising with like their paddles, and they've got a cooler full of beer and their fishing poles. So they're just sitting comfy.
They're doing it right.
Yeah. Yeah. So we had a ton of fun doing all the Goofy Alliance contests.
Okay. Something a little bit more serious. You've seen and shot countless photos and riders in your day. Over the years, who would you say was maybe the most underrated rider? Someone that maybe didn't get a fair shot at
Rob Jakes.
Rob Jakes.
There's multiple that I could probably think of if I had the time, but the first one that pops in my head is Rob. So I first met Rob early on because he was teaching at the projects. And Jeff, I remember Jeff saying like, hey dude, there's this kid that is teaching out there and he rips. And so at the time, Alliance used to have a section in the back of the mag called Coming Up, and we would feature an up and coming rider every issue. And so I immediately did one of those with Rob. And then I had an idea to do a trip and I think we ended up making it into a pull episode, but I called it the Coming Up Trip. And I took 4 riders from that year who had a coming up story, and we took them out to California to go to Mike Schweeney's houseboat and just give them a chance to free ride. And because Mike at the time was known as this sort of like very creative free ride based guy, and we wanted because a lot of these kids were probably getting put into the pipeline of, hey, you've got to start like hitting these certain tricks, and you've got to start making sponsors happy, you focus on your contests, and we wanted to give them an opportunity to like, hey, don't worry about all that. Also, you know, when it comes to riding for cameras, it's a lot different than riding for a contest. And so we would just go spend a week on a houseboat and free ride all day, every day. It was awesome. Robbie was on that first Coming Up trip, and I specifically remember being in the chase boat with Mike Schweeney driving, and Robbie threw down a pass, and this is 2006 maybe. So, you know, the wakes aren't huge. Robbie's on Danny Harf's. This is so before even Ronix started. So Robbie's on like Danny Harf's like premier hyperlight board, and he threw down a line that it was like 779 Crow 5 or something, and Schweeney was floored. And it looked good. He grabbed almost all of them, I think. He might have even grabbed the 9. And Schweeney was like, this is like the next Danny Harf, because he'd heard of Rob a little bit and seen some stuff. Rob had a little bit of a name in the super core of the industry. Rob had a name in terms of his rail riding so at the time the projects had one of the private lakes there was lined with rails, and guys would come, and back in the day you were only hitting rails on jet skis. And so Pat Pinacos, who ran it, and the guys that worked there would build incredible like rails, huge. And Rob was super talented on them. So Rob was known as quickly becoming one of the more better all-around riders in terms of park riding and boat riding, and so good, so much style, just a very fluid style, and really fun to watch, really fun to photograph and film. But just never Rob was never the kind of personality to where he could even like put himself out there that much. Just didn't love the attention, didn't love having to ask for any attention. And then sometimes in a sport like this, you sort of have to like put yourself out there a little bit more. And so at this time, you know, the sport's booming. There's a lot of kids catching on and stuff. And Rob had success with he was on Byerly boards for a while, and then actually was on the slingshot team with McKee for a while. And I still got to do like some super fun trips and shoots with him over the years, but he never caught on to like obviously being like the next Danny Harf or anything. Yeah. But he was so talented, and I still keep in touch with Rob. He's a firefighter down in South Florida now.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
So that's a name that probably a lot of people have never heard of.
A lot of people these days have probably not heard of Rob, but you can find some stuff if you. wonder if we could dig up some Rob Jakes video footage. There's probably some good stuff.
I bet there is. Who, if anyone, do you think has more wakeboard knowledge than you?
Kevin Michael, the former editor of Wakeboarding Mag. Kevco would have a ton of wakeboarding knowledge. Bill McCaffrey's got to have a ton because Bill was involved in it as like the first generation of pro riders, and then going on to, he worked for Wakeboarding Mag for a while, then started Alliance, and Bill's been connected since day one. Some of the OG guys that are still connected to the sport, Kobe Mikasic, Sean Murray, some of those guys would have some serious knowledge. Like my knowledge doesn't really go, other than being a fan, my knowledge, mainly starts in like when I started Alliance is like 05 on. But if you want to get like the 90s, I can tell you some stuff about like wake history and some things that happened. But I don't have like too much insider knowledge.
You're up there though. You're up there. You're definitely
I've been around
You've
a
been
while
around
now.
a long time.
Yeah, it's scary as it is to admit.
Who do you think is I don't ask this to a lot of people, but who do you think is the greatest of all time?
Man, I've definitely got like my own sort of like top, but the one great, I mean, you probably can't beat Parks would be up there just in terms of winning all the contests he did, all the different boards that he's been involved in and has sold over the years.
Tricks he's invented.
Yeah, tricks invented, and being so far ahead of the game, but boat riding, and then pushing like so many different things. Like who goes and tows into waves or slides icebergs or just finds all these other like different things to do with a wakeboard. Parks has got to be up there. I'd put Raph up there because there was one point in time where Raph was just untouchable, and so much success. Like Raph almost did contests just to prove people that he was that good. Like, because Raph was such a unique character, and I love the fact that they did his documentary, Au revoir, and like that was like his like ode to his career and ode to the sport, but also his like goodbye. Yeah. And but there was a point in time, like there was a few years where Raph was just doing contests just to like make his sponsors happy and be like, yeah, and now watch, I'll win them all.
This is easy.
Yeah. Now let me go film a project and be quiet.
Yeah. Don't call me for a while.
Don't call me for a while. I mean, my top list would be guys like Parks, Randall, Byerly, Raph, Danny Harf. Danny's impact on wakeboarding is also huge, and his competitive success. And then you look at like the video parts that he put down, and when he really started pushing like the double flips, like there was not a lot of guys like doing some of the double flip stuff, and Danny was just chucking himself off of double ups and landing multiple different double variations, and it was wild to witness for sure.
And the ladies,
the best ever to do it, or just some of the
your top one, the one that if you were to say who's the best women wakeboarder ever, the GOAT.
Amber.
Amber Wing.
Yeah, it might be. I mean, Amber was landing stuff, and then now you have to give. It's Megan's probably like right behind her just because of all of the success that Megan has had, and the way that she's helped push the sport through different avenues and different things. But I mean, Amber was untouchable for a while. Dallas was right up there too. I mean, Dallas is in the video game for a reason. You know, you can get into like who were the characters in Sean Murray's game and what impact were they having.
It's true.
And so, Amber, Dallas, Megan, like
Yeah, I think that's there's a consensus there for sure.
Yeah.
So as you were at Alliance and you were seeing big changes happen in the industry, some controversial, some not, what were some changes that were not accepted at the time, but turned out to be a game-changing?
Wake parks. Well, we used to joke about, I mean, the entire industry was joking about cable parks, because especially before they had any sort of rails.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I remember going to OW and there was like maybe a little kicker as like the one thing that was there. And I just remember thinking like this is just like slalom skiing, but on a tow rope, like on a ski tow, like type of rope. And who wants to just go in circles and like do air tricks? And then you started seeing, obviously rails were huge, you know, like guys were very into building their own rails. And then, but I don't know why there was a little bit of a gap between like what the pointless guys were building and what was being built at the projects. And you had contests, you know, that predated me, like the carnival, and guys like hitting some pretty wild stuff. And then, but nobody ever actually putting anything into a cable park. And so, but once that actually like became a thing and you started seeing some legit features at cable parks, then it was like, oh yeah, this is way legit. Like, or like, this could be a whole different avenue for the sport. And obviously then you have companies like Unit and stuff that are now worldwide and shipping product all over the world. And you have kids that, you have kids that ride cable parks now that in America that have never ridden behind the boat. Obviously in Europe, that's a totally different thing. Riding boats, very hard to access, or anywhere else in the world for that matter. But yeah, there's kids that have, you know, ridden cable park their entire childhood or entire lives and never been behind the boat. So, which is cool, I think.
Yeah, very cool. But as it was happening.
Yeah, yeah. And kudos to Foosh, the king of the cable, for helping some Americans like start seeing, like, you know, he caught on early. And what's funny is some of my first impressions of Tom before I actually got to meet him was just like who is this kid from Texas? And like what is he doing like all of these like European like events for? And does he even like know how to wakeboard behind the boat? And then you get to know him, and you quickly learn that Tom is actually a very accomplished and a good boat rider. Yeah. But so shout out to Foosh.
one of the all-time clips in the debut, Tom's part where he's hitting a boat wake off of a System 2. I don't know if you remember that. I think there's like an X-Star driving by, and there's
I forgot about
that. I think it might be at TSR. I don't know where it's at. But it's like a 7 off the wake from the cable.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Shot. Wake pants, yes or no?
Yeah, why not?
All right, there we go. Old head going with the wake pants.
Yeah.
I like it.
We still make jokes about like, you know, Shane, can you get Jet Pilot to make another run? And like he's like, yeah, and we'll sell all 12 of them.
Well, see, that's the thing with wake pants is you're doing it right if you just get them at the thrift shop for like $4.
Right.
I don't know if you need to be paying $70.
No, go give me my old Adidas tracksuit. You know?
Exactly. How fast is Chase Heavener?
Fast.
How fast we talking?
I don't know, but I remember. Did you see this in one of the old mags?
No, I saw this in a Stoke meter video with you and Jeff.
Oh, you found the Stoke meter interviews. Okay.
Stoke Master says Chase runs 19 miles an hour. He timed it with his GPS on his iPhone.
Actually, after we did the high-speed whip contest on the jet skis, Chase put the helmet on that had the GPS unit and ran down the street, and he hit 18.
Did he really?
Yeah.
He's fast, man. He's so fast.
He's a speedy, bearded big dude.
Okay, so dude, so Chase. The funny thing about Chase, former pro wakeboarder, went on to make some pretty cool videos. One was called Invisible Cinema, and the other one was called Pre-Pop. And then he was always closely connected with Alliance. Helped start it with Bill McCaffrey back in the day. But when he got into like the video side of things, he was also like he and Jeff would come up with some of the silly stuff that we would do. One of Jeff's silly contests was the high-speed whip contest. And so we got the fastest jet ski we could and had guys get towed behind it. And then they would have to go on a full whip and then let go. And we had a friend that had a radar gun, but it ended up not being as accurate as we needed. We had one of the early GPS trackers, because this is all pre like iPhones and stuff. And so we put the GPS tracker on a helmet and made the guys wear it, and then it would track how fast they were going. And so I think Rusty hit a whip that was like 50 something miles an hour on his wakeboard, and he's just cruising across this like part of the lake, and we're like, holy crap. But so then after we're all done, Chase is like who wants to foot race? And at the time, Chase has gone through some stages in terms of the size of his waist, and he still laughs about it to this day. But like heavy Chase, we call it C heavy. Heavy Chase, I think he was in one of his like heavier stages, and smoked everybody. Like put on the helmet.
Just
and
that sneaky fast guy.
Dude, sneaky fast. Started running down the street and smoked everybody. Even like the other like wakeboard, like in shape athletes that were there. It was super funny. Super funny. So Chase is fast.
Pretty fast. Do wakeboarders take aqua dumps?
Yes, a lot.
Have you taken an aqua dump?
I think only once. It was super awkward. Not for me.
The awkward dump.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never done it.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Oh. I figured because if you spend enough time at photo shoots on boats and stuff, and sometimes you're in the middle of nowhere, you know, and are in the middle of like nowhere on the lake. I gotta go.
Yeah. Hey man, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
It's only human. Cavemen used to do it.
Yeah.
You and Benny G used to have a go-to shoot named the Guaranteed Select. Is what he said. What was the trick and the lighting situation?
Backlit nose grab Pete. I'm sure is what he was talking about.
Nailed that one.
Benny, one of my favorite riders ever, and obviously was at the forefront of like a certain like sort of style movement. Ben made a name for himself for just riding different, grabbing and poking. And when there was a pretty big emphasis on adding another spin and just getting pretty gnarly with some contest passes, Benny was just making things look different. And like, I think at one point he was one of the only guys who could like legitimately grab and poke a 7, like put a legit grab on it, poke it out, spin the 7. Actually, one of the first things I had to shoot when I moved to Florida, Ben was in the process of working. Ben was going to be Rider of the Year. I don't know if he was going to be Rider of the Year yet, but I needed to get a sequence of one of his grabbed, poked 7s that like the industry was talking about. Like, holy cow, this guy Benny G. And I remember being like super nervous about like when you need a whole sequence, you need that entire sequence to be like in focus. Mm-hmm. And I was like, dude, this is a guy that's like landing this trick now, and if I blow this, if I can't get the sequence in focus, I'm gonna be screwed. Like, fortunately, we got it, and then Benny and I went on to do tons of photo shoots together over the years and become good friends. And we would always like one of Ben's signatures was a nose grab Pete Rose that he just made look super cool because of the way that he poked out his leg and did the rotation. And came down out of the 360. And I would shoot. I'm a sucker for silhouettes. I love shooting backlit. I just think water photography in general can look cool backlit, especially if you get like the setting sun lighting up like the takeoff spray or something. It just adds like a dynamic to the photo that I think looks cool. And so Benny and I made the joke about like, oh, let's just go shoot backlit. I'll do a nose grab Pete. We'll get a photo, put it in the mag.
Classic, Guaranteed Select.
Yeah, Jeff McKee had the method. And what else would Jeff do? Jeff would always throw a method if he ever needed to. And there was something else. And Benny had the nose grab Pete.
Love it. Let's touch on Orlando a little bit, and then there's something I want to do where we go over. I hand picked out 10 or so covers.
Okay, rad.
And photos I'd love to go over, but let's just talk about Orlando real quick.
Yeah.
Did you see yourself staying here as long as you have? Obviously, it sounds like that wasn't your plan.
That was not my plan initially. I told Bill, like, give me like 5 years. Yeah. And I probably want to come back to California. And but ultimately met a girl, and the rest is history. So she, my wife grew up in Orlando, and her mother grew up in Orlando. My wife is actually 8th generation Floridian. So our daughter is now a 9th generation Floridian. And once I learned the history of like her family, I was like, oh, I don't know, ain't no way we're leaving. And so, I mean, to the point now, like when my wife did get pregnant with our daughter, my parents were not interested in doing the like the long distance coast to coast grandparenting thing. So they were able to get a place to retire. They were at retirement age around the time my daughter was born, and so they bought a place out here, and now they're like 2 miles away. So I spent however many years like living on opposite coast from my parents, and now they're like around the corner again almost. It's kind of wild, but it's awesome. I love it. So and the Orlando scene is still, even though wakeboarding has changed so much, there is still a scene that has to do with like being a pro and being connected to Orlando. I do get a little bit bummed that there used to be pockets in different parts of the
Okay.
country.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that.
Yeah, so like there was a Texas scene, and you had guys like Gabe Lucas and Tom Fouché and Joey Arches and other guys coming up in that region, and then eventually like Shred Town started popping up there, and you had like a SoCal scene, and you had Melissa Marquette and Randall Harris, Ricky G, Kyle Murphy, Cody Hall, the Valdez brothers. You had the Northwest scene with Nick and Mike Ennin, and some other guys that were up there. And so there were these like pockets of pros that they were sponsored and getting, some of them even getting like pro model boards. Like Gabe Lucas, I think, had a pro model with CWB, and obviously Randall had pro models and stuff. And I mean, there was the NorCal scene that I came from that had, Mike Sweeney and Derek Cook and, that Delta crew. And then from there you had Josh Twalker and Trevor Maurer. So those have sort of ceased to exist in some, at least not in the way that they were. There are obviously still like localized pockets of, of a scene, but not as much in terms of the professional world, it feels like.
Yeah.
I mean, to the point where if I needed a photo of like, oh, Mike Ennin's like doing this, and you could hit up a photographer that you knew in the Northwest who wasn't just like making money off of just shooting wakeboarding, like, but they were, shooting wakeboarding enough to know the sport, and I could reach out and be like, hey, like, is there any chance like you have something recent of Mike, or reach out to somebody in Texas, like, hey, you have anything of this, this person or that person. So, and I don't think that is quite the way it is anymore.
Yeah, it's not. And it's interesting to think about because Orlando is, a very small part in the grand scheme of like people who wakeboard and people who care about the sport.
Right.
So it's interesting, maybe frustrating at times, that this is where all the pro wakeboarding is, when all the other places in the country and the world have very strong scenes as well.
Right. And what still separates Orlando and what makes wakeboarding unique, I think, is that it's just the access to lakes and to warm weather. If you're a pro snowboarder and you want to live in the Rockies, you can live in the Rockies. You want to live in California, you can live in California. You want to live in Europe, you can live in Europe. So, and then you want to do the endless winter, go south of the hemisphere. With wakeboarding, if you really want to ride year round and you want to have a place to live on the water that's somewhat easy to do, Orlando is sort of your only option. There's other cities in Florida that have lots of lakes, but a lot of them are just within an hour or two of Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's sort of what keeps people coming back here. And you still see younger kids like making the move here. Like you have kids like Sam Brown and Luca Kidd and Tyler Hyam who
Finn.
Yeah, Finn, Finn grew up in the Carolinas riding with Adam Fields. But they make the move just because there is still like a scene, and it's so much easier to ride here that it just makes sense. And there isn't really another place to like really do that as easily. So who knows? Will that change? I don't know.
Nobody knows. Yeah, talk about Orlando. Do have a Patreon question from Dan Lay.
Nice.
I'm sure yeah, I spent some time together. If you haven't joined the Patreon and you want to, make sure to do that. You guys can submit questions and see if they're appropriate enough. I'll ask them to the guest.
Yeah. Dan Lay just won the. He just won like we call it like the Maniac Downhill. WSA is like the governing like group that helps oversee like towed water sports, and they do an incredible job. But then every year we do a summit in the snow, and so it's mainly higher ups from brands getting together and just talking industry together. There's little breakout sessions, but they set it up so there's a lot of time on the snow together.
So that's his question.
Yeah.
Basically, what was your favorite memory from 2023's WSA Summit?
I mean,
got caught in the blizzard.
Oh, dude. Yeah, the blizzard. So, yeah. Anyway, so the WSA Summit is awesome. It's my excuse to also then get back onto the snow, each winter. And it's great to see a lot of different people in the industry who I've gotten to know over the years. But yeah, getting to Tahoe. So it's been in Tahoe for the last few years at the resort at Squaw Creek, and getting there this year, a bunch of us landed in Reno right before one of the big Tahoe storms hit, like a monster storm. and Aaron Grace was driving, Jimmy Redmond was riding shotgun, and I'm in back, and we're in a Toyota Venza hybrid. It's like a crossover, looks like a station wagon, does not have snow tires, has all-wheel drive, but does not have snow tires. And the main highway up there is 80. 80 was already closed, so you couldn't get from Reno to the North Shore. The only road that was open was a mountain pass that goes past Mount Rose from Nevada into California. It drops you down, and then you would have to wind around the lake to get to the resort at Squaw Creek. And Aaron's like, well, let's just see what the road looks like. And if we get stuck in Reno, we'll turn around and go back. And we start climbing up the mountain pass, and it had actually gotten plowed somewhat earlier that day. There was a couple inches of fresh on it, but just like crunchy. And it's starting to get, it's dark now. So you can at least see if headlights are coming. The hardest part about driving in a blizzard, I feel like, is in middle of the day, because you can't see headlights coming at you. And if you lose like where the lines on the road are and you're on a whiteout, you have no idea what's coming or which even direction you're heading. Yeah. At least when it's dark and there's headlights, there's a lot of snow blowing at you, but you might see headlights coming at you. Yeah. So we only passed like a couple cars. So getting over the pass was actually okay. We were just doing like 20 miles an hour. It took forever, and made our way down. By the time we got to the lake, things were getting pretty thick and rutted out, and it had not been plowed in a while. And I was like, I remember telling Aaron, like, hey man, Aaron was pretty stressed, like just not wanting, obviously, us to get in an accident, not have anything bad happen. I was like, dude, the bar is going to be closed by the time we get to the hotel. Let's stop and get a beer before like any of these gas stations close. And so he whips into enough snow is built up that where, like if you've ever driven in snow and you're like pulling into a parking lot, if you stop too soon and you're in like an unplowed area, your car's not getting out. You're gonna have to shovel it or just wait for a plow to come.
Momentum, baby.
Yeah, you need momentum. So he sends it to get into like the covered area underneath like where the gas pumps are. I run out of the car. They stay in. I run out of the car, and guy, from behind the counter goes, "Oh man, you don't need gas, do you? We're almost bone dry." I'm like, "Oh no, I just need some beers, man. We just drove from the airport." What frickin' airport? Oh, just flew into Reno. What road did you drive on? We're like, oh, we were able to come on like the Mount Rose Pass. This is the only one open on Google Maps, and it's the way it sent us. He's like, in what car did you make that drive in these conditions? I point out. I'm like, that little Toyota out there. He's like, you guys are dumb. He's like, you should not be here right now. And so I'm like, yeah, well, we still got to try and get to the resort.
We're here.
He's like, we still got to try and get to the resort at Squaw Creek. And so I grab a couple of cases of beer, get in the car. And then by the time you're down the road to get to Squaw Creek, it's super rutted out. You can't see anything. And you can feel the car like starting to lose traction and stuff. And Grace is like, dude, we might get stuck. We might not make it. We might not make it. And we actually ended up making a wrong turn, having to come back and then get into and then we finally pull into like the covered driveway area of the resort. And the like bellhop guy comes out just like wide-eyed, like same as the gas station attendant, just like looking at us like, how is there a car here right now? Like, where have you come from and how did you get here? Because it has now been dumping for hours and there's snow everywhere. And the forecast was for it to continue all day the next day. We were all stoked. We're like, we made it. There's going to be
no one here.
There's going to be no one here because no one can get here. And we're going to get first tracks. But it ended up snowing so much that every resort was closed the next day. It was the worst. So we sat and drank at the resort and just looked out at like the mountain full of fresh, untracked snow, and still got actually the most epic snow the next morning.
I was going to say, whenever they cleared it out, you still probably had great tracks.
Yeah.
Wow.
But shout out to Dan. Dan won the, so there was a Maniac, we do a Maniac race, the Maniac downhill set up by the Alliance crew. And basically everybody goes to the top of the mountain, and you have to get it's not just top to bottom. It's like start at the top, get down to one lift, take another lift up, and then get down like back to the resort. So I think it's a 2 or 3 chairlift race. And this is it's called Palisades now, Squaw Valley. Some of it's not easy. Like there's a famous run lift at Squaw called KT22. So I think they started at the top of KT and chug an adult beverage, adult soda, ride down. You had to meet me. I was at one of the meeting points. I was a checkpoint. Chug a beer at my checkpoint. Not beer. Chug a not beer.
Beer.
Yeah, take another lift up. and then get down to the resort and meet at the bottom and continue to party. But Dan won the snowboard leg of that.
Wait, so is it every man for themselves,
Yes.
or is it relay?
No, every man for themselves.
But it's snowboarders and skiers are two separate.
Two separate,
Has
yeah.
to be. Skiers would smoke snowboarders.
Yeah, Aaron Grace is an insanely talented snow skier, and he smoked everybody.
Yeah.
Him and Don Wallace are the OGs that I still like. We're the three guys in the sport that probably don't snowboard.
You're a skier,
I still
right? You grew up
ski.
skiing,
Yeah. I thought when I went to school at Boulder, I was like, okay, now I'm going to learn. I'm going to be on the mountain all the time. But then I would just get there and be like, nah, why would I want to like waste my time like falling when I could just like go rip? So
You go way faster on skis.
you go way faster.
Yeah. Well, skiing's easy. Water skiing and snow skiing
Right,
are both
right.
really easy. So,
Super easy.
I dabble on both. But yeah, let's dive into some covers. I
Heck
think
yeah.
It's all right, so I think the best way to do this, I'm just gonna. These are not in any particular order.
Okay.
Because I was flipping through them, and I think most of them, if not all, are you.
Okay.
But let's just run
Even if they're not.
one at a time. I'll slide them over to you, and then you just hold it up for a sec, and then let's just dive into the cover because I'm sure each one has a story. And
This is the final issue of Wakeboarding Mag that went to print. We're very proud of this. So the cover, a very unique photo, and I think we turned it into partly a gatefold. But yeah. Shota Tezuka and shot by Chris Garrison, also known as Flash Garrison. And so going into this issue, we were also redesigning the mag. We working with Mike Forrest, super talented creative guy, and took like the whole Wakeboarding Mag like script logo off the top and just went with this like more basic like one here, and just we were really playing up throughout the whole year leading up to this redesign. If you go back and look at some covers from that year, we were playing up with the W with like the electric in it, and but so yeah, we were really stoked on putting this issue together, and it had like a photo annual in it with some really cool photos. Had the readers poll, which is a long running Wakeboarding Mag franchise where readers get to like vote for whoever their favorite rider is. And then this photo was just so unique and so different because you have this, I believe Shota told me this, I think there's only 2 of these, I think they're called torii gates, and obviously they're connected to like Japanese temples, and there's only 2 that are in water, and one is on a lake nearby where he grew up wakeboarding. They went on a mission to try and like make this happen, and ended up working out.
beautiful shot.
Oh, dude, unbelievable. Yeah, so kudos to those guys for I mean, just for Shota to like line up like where he was jumping and then Chris to get that shot. I had to double check with Chris. I was like, do you have to Photoshop him into position?
It's not kosher here for doing that.
So
That's a good one.
Yeah, it
Solid
worked.
one.
Yeah, so it worked.
One
out.
of the few that wasn't shot by you here, but you might be able to actually lean this up against that mic stand,
Yeah.
and that way it'll show and frame. I'll double check the camera here real quick
All
just
right.
to make sure if that even stays.
Or I can hold it.
That works too.
Yeah. Yeah, so you've got, this would have been one of the other early Alliance covers that I got, and this was Mike Sweeney on the Delta doing a classic method grab. And I remember actually my first introduction to having to Photoshop a photo to make it work for the magazine. So coming from the journalism background, like touching anything with Photoshop other than like you were only allowed to do in Photoshop what you can do in a dark room, which is basically like, are you going to lighten or darken some things, tone things a certain way just to get it to develop the way you want. And so like you're not adding or subtracting anything. And so in order to get this photo to fit, because of the way I shot it, the art director had to add sky. So this is the sky from like the logo up is just added based off of the color blue of the original photo. And when the art director told me that, I was like, is that okay? I was like, are we allowed to, is that okay? He's like, yeah, of course. I needed space to put the logo. Why wouldn't it be okay? I was like, well, are you
Messing with the photo.
I don't know if you're allowed to do that. But I was stoked on this because I think I knew this would be Mike's first cover ever. And one thing that I did with this and then ended up doing subsequently as other writers started getting covers over the years was not tell them that it was coming. And then I think I was with him when it came out, or I brought a box to him or something, and he was so stoked. So that was a cool one. And it was cool for me because I was like the Delta, like where I grew up riding. And then getting to like see the Delta on the cover of Alliance and have it be a guy like Mike was pretty sweet.
It's my favorite style of method right there. That like knee poke tweak
Yeah,
method.
yeah.
My personal favorite.
Mike is still ripping as I believe a 40-year-old.
He still rocks those old boots, doesn't he?
Oh,
too?
so he actually. So
Finish that, yeah.
Funny story. I saw Mike a handful of years ago for the first time in a long time, and actually was able to do a photo shoot with him at Lake McClure, and we had a ton of fun doing it, and we were catching up. And so Mike loves rocking old school, just old wrap bindings. Like they're not closed toe. They're what you wore in like the late 90s. And he just loves. Well, he wants to get ejected if he's going to take a hard fall, and which I totally get now. And he just loves the flexibility of them and being able to just poke and do different stuff. So he and I are catching up, and I'm laughing with him about his old bindings. And then my dad had just recently told me that their house in California where I grew up, the basement, like some of my old wakeboards are still in there, and there's a couple liquid forces with ultra suctions on them. And I told Mike, he was like, "Can I buy those off of you?" And I was like, "Dude, you can
just have them, man."
You know, I think I told him to. I was like, "Whatever you would pay me, make a donation to Wakewell." I was working with the Wakewell crew at the time, and so so Schweeny loves rocking old flexi rubber overlay bindings.
It's an easier way to get that knee all the way down to the board for those tuck knees, which are super impressive. All right, this one right here,
Parks' Iceberg that we talked about earlier. But yeah, so this is Parks in Newfoundland, and another one. So Alliance was doing a lot of gatefold covers in this 3 or 4 year range, where you could open it up and fold it out. And this is that earlier Iceberg that we hit, and I think you were asking about what they were wearing. What's funny is that water is like 40 something degrees, super cold. So they're in full dry suits with gloves and booties. So like your skin is basically like not really touching water. Yeah. And then, but I'm in like the air temp was in like high 50s, 60.
And sunny, right?
And sunny. Like we scored great conditions for this shoot. So I'm still in jeans, but I'm in a t-shirt. And I'm just like laughing at like these guys are like, "Oh, it's so cold. It's so cold." But this was definitely a memorable, very different, very fun shoot.
How long do you think the riding time was for that session?
You mean like how long will each guy go?
Yeah, how many hits each? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, Parks probably hit this, because then once he did like that layback, I was moving our photo boat around some to try and get in like a little bit different positions, and trying to see what like looked cool. Like, was it cool having him like looking down the line, having him come at us, and like you're looking down the side of the iceberg, or do I want to see like him ollie up and like, you know, he's doing these like hand plant layback type things. And so he probably rode more than once, if I remember, on this iceberg, and it was probably 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Behind a jet ski.
Yeah. We were just doing laps on jet skis, because like, the nice thing was that like they could, if they didn't fall, they could stay dry and like then just loop around. So, yeah, it was super fun.
All right, this one is, I think, my opinion. So for the listeners right now, this might be a little bit tough of a listen. So go on YouTube and watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, watch it.
Otherwise, we're describing it. So, this is probably the craziest photo I think ever shot on a wakeboard. Or of a wakeboarder.
JD. So this is JD Webb. So this is a fountain in downtown Orlando. There's a little lake where you don't normally put boats in this lake. They've done it for special events every now and then, but it's mainly just a tourist lake for, you rent your duck boats and paddle around. There's a fountain. It's called Lake Eola, and that's a Lake Eola fountain. And JD was going to film an episode of what was then a show called Stunt Junkies. And so this was a huge production, because it's, I think, either Discovery Channel or something. It was a big deal. So there's the crews that had to build this thing. They originally built this structure in JD's backyard so he could practice, and they just had like the measurements of like where it would go. And then obviously when it's time to film the actual episode, it's, reassemble it and put it in the fountain. They used a Nautique ski boat to pull him just so it could go faster. But I think one with a tower. I think Sean Murray was driving it, actually.
I mean, the tower can't make that much of a difference.
No,
How many feet? I mean, it helps for sure.
Yeah,
but
I forget how long of a rope he's using. But I mean, yeah, he is that like gap to gap. I want to say it was 50 or no, it's probably in the magazine somewhere. We could look it up. It was huge. And obviously, I mean, that's a super tall ramp.
The takeoff ramp is
So
2
huge.
stories, 3 stories.
Yeah, for him to get up and then over that part of the fountain, and then land on like that landing ramp, it was so insane. And I remember being super, super nervous. Like, so this
Were you there?
Yeah, this is my photo.
Yeah, that's your photo.
So this is a 2007 issue. Well, actually, in January of 07. So this was shot in the fall of 06. So I'd been at the mag full time for like a year, if that. And this was like the biggest. This was a huge deal because this is wakeboarding that's going to be on Discovery Channel or whatever. And it's, Stunt Junkies was doing all sorts of crazy stuff with all sorts of other crazy athletes. And we were very limited in where we could go because of the controlled nature of the environment and the production crew needing to have like, there's going to be one camera boat here, there's going to be one camera boat here, and you're not moving. We're not messing anything up for JD. Like, and so I just remember like, okay, I'm in this photo boat. I'm like, okay, I think I need to shoot it with this lens. And I have no idea, is JD going to make this? Is he going to hit it once and be done?
Yeah.
And so he ended up hitting it multiple times. I believe this was from the first hit, maybe the second. But I remember I was like, I want to shoot it a little bit wider. I don't want to be tight on him just over the.
No, you got to have.
I wanted to show more of the scene. And I think the full photo, you see even more of the buildings, but it didn't fit the format.
Is it on the back there? What's on is it the same photo? Just
that's a different. So this is the Hyperlight ad.
Okay.
Hyperlight had the ad of JD, standing at the top of the ramp, like looking at how crazy it is. I think there's other content in this issue related to that. It was so crazy. And so then the funny story behind this is, I believe the date happened is September, whatever Parks' birthday is. So the day that went down was on Parks' birthday, and in the city of Orlando, it is now known as JD Webb Day because JD Webb jumped in Lake Eola Fountain. So Parks' birthday is JD Webb Day in Orlando. And it's
down, Parks.
Yeah.
Oh, unreal photo. Absolutely unreal photo. Take a look at that one for me.
Jeff McKee zeeching his way through a Gear Guide cover.
You see it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. We used to shoot like that all the time. Nobody cared. We didn't care. Actually, I don't know if Zeech had really been even a thing at that point.
But,
So the goal with the Gear Guide for several years was to try and find different ways to get product on the cover and show like different boards, but with an action shot.
Still have wakeboarding, yeah.
Yeah, because I had done it. I had done some in the years prior to this that were just product based, like trying different things. Like, how can I shoot product creatively? I did like some light painting stuff with product. But so then with Jeff was like, what if we just shove a bunch of boards around the rail? And honestly, the hardest part was actually getting them to stay because so this is obviously before System 2s might have been in use at some places, but 2011, I don't know. So this is at the projects where we're still hitting rails with jet skis, and the jet ski wake would make these roll around and move more than we wanted. We ended up Jeff took a bunch of fishing line and tied them all together and then tied them to the rail. But so that's how we got those boards to stay in place.
So
but yeah, the Zeech.
Send that Zeech over to Jeff.
This one I just actually did a Instagram post about.
Yep.
So this is 2013, Rusty doing a corked truck driver 540. Rusty had started doing or telling me, I think Rusty had done some in like wakeboarding, we call them like an osmosis spin where you let go of the handle, do the rotation and grab it. And he mentioned to me wanting to do like a truck driver grab where you're basically grabbing grabbing the board with both hands at the same time. And I was like, dude, I think that'd be insane. And I was like, I think we can get a cover of that.
Yeah.
And we were talking about what would be the best way. He's like, I think I have to like cork it out. And like the way he's spinning to then get both hands on and then be able to let go with one hand and get the handle out of the air. And we basically just came to the conclusion that like from the tube would probably be the best. I was like, I think you'll be up in the sky. I'll see both your hands on the board pretty easily. So let's just try that. And like, so the first time we started trying it, I knew immediately we would probably have a cover as long as he could land it. But this took us, we actually went through and because I'm shooting we knew it was a trick that would never be done. So I'm shooting a sequence of every time he's trying this trick. So on the tube and just like Rusty's cutting in, take off to landing every single time, just firing through. And most of the time it's fall. It ended up being 8 or 9 days, but not sequentially. So I think the first time was 4 or 5 days of me driving out to Rusty's place every day, and we're going to try this. And he would ride for an hour or more. And either he had to call it because he was getting too frustrated, or I would have to call it because my legs were so sore from like riding on the tube and trying to like just keep doing
Keep
that
in frame every single time, yeah.
And then we took like he had to travel for some different events or whatever. Ended up probably being like a 2 or 3 week break, maybe even more. Got back together and shot for like 2 or 3 more days straight. And then he landed the first one, and we were just both freaking out. And I actually, at this point, I started putting a GoPro on my water housing to try and get video of it. And so that's what I posted to social the other day. Was it popped up in my memories as being like a 10-year-old thing. And so I just start screaming into the GoPro like,
Finally.
woo! And Russ, and then he probably proceeded to do this like 2 or 3 more times. But this is still one of like, I just thought that the way the water drops like came at the camera, but then Rusty's still like in focus, and you can see the handles like hanging there in midair, and
Both grabs.
Both grabs are like locked in, and then he just comes around and like snatches it. I don't know did we put the sequence in here? We had to have, but I don't know. Oh yeah,
right
there it is. So we ended up using a sequence that wasn't the actual cover photo, just because this photo looked better for the cover. And then this, like one of the still photo with both hands on the grab was like more of a butt shot, and you couldn't see his face as much. So it wasn't as dynamic, but that's what it looked like as a full sequence.
Solid trick, solid photo. Osmosis is one of the coolest things you can do. And I mean,
it's pretty nuts in wakeboarding.
Unique things you could do in wakeboarding.
Yeah. Rathy has done some banger osmosis tricks over the years. Like
he's done 1-footers
and 720 osmosis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rathy and Rusty both are good at them.
Oh, this one. We were so stoked to launch this. I think we launched this at Surf Expo when Surf Expo was still a big thing, and whatever issue you were coming out with was sort of a big deal because the entire industry would be there to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is obviously a very different statement sort of piece. You can just see spray, but once you open the gatefold, you get that actually ends up being Dieter Humpsch, wake skater on a Ronix. And that Ronix graphic, like, I think had it been any other graphic, it probably wouldn't have been as strong of a photo. But because they just had that smiley face graphic on a darker board, it works so well with the light
simple
of the spray.
Yeah.
And dude, I mean, kudos. So this is a Brian Soderlund. He's known on Instagram as the Golden Bear, or he's known to most people as just Bear. But dude, super talented photographer. I loved working with all the photographers over the years. And like, sometimes I loved getting to see like other photographers' really good photos and like picking a cover shot. And even if it was like better than one of my photos or whatever, like I just wanted to make like the best mags possible.
Yeah. And
getting to work with guys like Bear made that really easy to do, because Bear is a super, super talented photographer.
Seeing other people's take on it too, and their creativity is super awesome.
Yeah.
All right, this was just all right.
Oh yeah, Jeff Langley going huge off of a double up. I mean, huge. Jeff Langley was known for just boosting, and this was just this was just a random shoot on Clear Lake. Jeff lived on Clear Lake for a long time, still technically does. He spends a lot of time between Texas and Orlando now. But I think we were doing a Shane with I think Adam Fields was in town for a bit. I think Adam was there. Shane rode, Jeff rode, maybe one other person rode. And Jeff is one of the riders out there who will, at the end of a pass, ask for a double up. And so, man, I don't remember who was putting me in, who was driving the chase that day, but we were just sitting inside the double up, letting Jeff boost, and he just got booted on this one. And I remember actually thinking it could be a cover. Because a lot of covers you're sort of working with a rider on something hey, I think if we with Rusty, I think if we really hone in on this, we can get a cover.
Yeah.
And then there's some that just happen. And so this is one of those ones that I just passed on to the rest of the staff, after I took it. And immediately, I think Bill Corey and Steve Riley is the art director. We're all just dude, that double up photo is a cover. Method grab, boosting off a double up cover. Easy. I was oh, if you guys all are all into it, cool. I'll back that. And I mean, yeah, now when you look at it, he's up there. So there's something about big air.
I was about to say, there's one thing in, it's all board sports and whatever, but in wakeboarding, going big is easily understood by people who don't even know what's going on.
Right.
That guy went really fucking big.
That guy went huge. And Jeff was really good at going big. I've made a joke with riders over the years that I'll never get tired of taking pictures of somebody going big.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Shout out to Keith Lyman and Randall Harris.
Randall Harris. Speaking of, we were talking about one footers a little earlier.
Yeah, so this is Dylan Miller. This is all 2015, and Dylan was doing these 1 foot 360 variations, and they looked awesome. And so I remember I had done, I'd shot some sequences of him doing these tricks. They are wrapped 1 foot 360s, I believe. So he comes into the wake wrapped with 1 foot, obviously not in a binding, and then as he's unwrapping and doing the trick, he's kicking his foot off, grabbing the board, completing the spin. I'd shot sequences of them and they turned out really cool. And then I was talking to him about hey, I think that one image where your foot is fully kicked off, I was I think if we set it up right, we could get a cover. I wanted to shoot it with a strobe and try and get so you set up a flash that's in the towboat, and when you fire the camera with a remote, it fires that flash. Mm-hmm. And so that's how you get a rider to be lit up like that. And it lets you then shoot in a more dynamic sort of lighting situation, this sort of, it's obviously a lot darker out and that sunset. But Dylan, dude, kudos to Dylan for being able to go for it. And it took us a few. The hard part about when you're shooting with a flash is usually it's just one shot. You get one chance to yeah. And so I'm trying to get the timing down with Dylan and be okay, here he comes, okay, and his foot's kicking now, and then you try and get it. But yeah, this one I always really like this one.
Any hate on the 1 footers throughout the history of wakeboarding?
Actually, no, I don't.
No.
I mean, and dude, I remember some guys doing it back in the day and thinking they were nuts. So Gabe Lucas, I remember shooting on CWB shoots with him, and he was on, was it the CWB Vibe? I want to say it was the name of that board. And he would just pull his foot out of his binding. And he was just doing grabs wake to wake and then, kicking a foot off. But I thought it was awesome.
Barefoot?
Yeah. Yeah.
Luca does that shit now.
Yeah.
Put a shoe on or something. I mean, it's nuts. Wake to wake, I think, is nuts with just barefoot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's sick. I love watching it.
It is. What else you got?
All right. Got a couple park ones here.
Yeah, park ones. So this is Nico van Larkenfeld. This was in Thai Wake Park shooting for LF and Awesome. And yeah, so the Thai Wake Park is obviously a super cool location to shoot at. And they had, they have this, bi-level pool with a little concrete spillway. And Nico was I want to do some stuff going up it. And we had a killer sunset right before this. And then I was like, Nico, I think actually if you're game for still riding, like let's set up a few flashes. I packed some with me. So I set up some strobes and I was just floating in the bottom lake while Nico went up, and he was just doing these tail grab poke backside 180s that looked so good. And so we just sort of like, this is one of those ones where it just took a few tries to dial it in, and then I mixed it up. There's one I almost pushed more for the cover than this, and where I shot with like a wide angle lens, and I got like right down here at the bottom of the spills. It just ended up being like a little bit more chaotic with all like the water and stuff, and this one just looked cleaner, I thought, and I really like the color of the sky. So yeah, Thailand, Elephant Awesome.
Sometimes less is more.
Yeah,
Telegraph
yeah.
back one.
And I've always been a fan of on the cover, like sometimes it does need to just be like simple.
Well, because hard tricks don't photo well, right?
Right.
I mean, you can't photo a 1080.
Right.
You
Right.
can, but you're only going to get one frame.
And then this is probably my favorite cover.
Okay, because I was going through these, and that one was like stuck out to me very much. So,
Yeah.
so it's interesting to hear that.
Yeah.
It's one of yours.
Yeah. So this is the last cover I shot for Alliance, and it didn't come out, and so it's the March of 2017 issue. So it didn't come out until I was already working at Wakeboarding Mag. So Kevin and I shot this probably 8 months earlier, but we were holding on to it for a cover because we knew it was this is the photo annual issue, and we would try and save like the really special photos for that issue. So Kevin and I got this, and we were just like, oh, this isn't going to be seen for a while. And then ultimately, I didn't know it at the time I took this, but ultimately I was no longer working for Alliance when the issue came out. So I had to sort of like I didn't get to brag about it on social media because I didn't want to be the editor of Wakeboarding Mag, and be like, hey, so the latest issue of Alliance that I don't work for anymore just came out, but I shot the cover and I really like it. No, but so this was at Area 52, and Henny had built the wall with like the creeper ledges, and started doing some like really different stuff. And then I knew that like he and I had shot with Kevin a bunch at Area 52 over the years. I shot another cover of him jibbing the tree that stuck out into the water, and I loved going out there and just like shooting with not just Henny, but any of the guys that were out there. We always had a good time, and just obviously free reign, right? So we set up there's I think 2 or 3 lights to make this photo. There's obviously the one straight above him. There's one off on the shore, like pointing up, and there might have been one like down this way. But so Kevin was just like trying to dial in these, when you want to call that a
Back lip, right?
Yeah.
Back tail. I mean, yeah.
I remember the decision for me was how tight do I want to shoot this? And originally I was shooting it horizontally, and I wanted to shoot it like so you could see. I had my camera like up against the wall, so you could see all the wall over here. And it was cool because that part of the wall was much darker. It wasn't getting hit by the flashes. So you had this like wall that ran along the photo, and then you had Henny at the end of it. But then once I realized, hey, I think this could be a cover, I changed how I was shooting it and shot more vertically. And really, for me, it was, again, just timing with the light. I wanted Kevin to be as pressed out as possible, and then for him to be like right under this light and to have sort of a street light effect.
Yeah.
I had a debate with myself about like, because it's all black, do I just Photoshop that out and like get rid of that flash? But I think it sort of adds a fun little element.
No, you're right. I like it with it.
But and then I knew as soon as I was taking these, like one, I knew they would look really cool black and white. And we hadn't run a black and white cover for a while. So yes, I was the editor, but the covers were never like I was not final say. It was a team kind of thing. And I was really like, dude, guys, we had gone to this like more of a matte finish. And I was like, I think black and white would look awesome. If Steve thinks like it'll print okay and not like look too weird, like having this much black on it. And he was like, I think it'll look awesome. So we sat on this for a while, and then, I think it's one of Kevin's favorite photos. And it's probably my favorite cover, just because it was so different to have this black and white cover that is mainly black and less like white and gray. And so then Steve has to invert, if you look at one of the other alliances, everything else is usually black. It's a black logo. And so for the logo to go white and stuff was just, it was cool. And that was a fun one to get. And I like the fact that it is like the last issue of Alliance that I worked on.
Dark, mysterious.
And it was a good way to go out. Good way to go out. I think who was the writer? Was this Twelker's writer of the year?
What year is that?
Yeah, Twelker's writer of the year. So this is 2016 would have been the year that it was recapping. So Josh was the 2016 writer of the year.
Interesting. I don't know. I feel like was writer of the year ever usually a cover, or is that decision split? Because that's just interesting to me. It seems like would be, you know,
writer of the year was almost always revealed in the photo annual issue.
Okay.
Because it was a year. It's like sort of like the year end issue.
Yeah.
So here's your writer of the year. Here's the best photos of the year. And I don't know if I think a lot of times what would end up happening is the fact that the fact that the writer of the year had a cover earlier that year played a part in him getting writer of the year. So there was sometimes it was like, well, we're not going to put him on the cover twice.
Yeah.
And it would always try and like go for like the strongest photo for I'm sure we could go back and find some that where the writer of the year was on the cover. But like I think the year Raph got writer of the year.
Was that the chain shot?
No, because that
before
that shot came out the year that he got writer of the year,
So, okay.
if I remember correctly. And so we're like, well, he's already had the cover. And again, that cover was the 100th issue of Alliance. So it was like this extra large format. And it was like a big deal. We're like, okay, so Raph has just done this, this, and this. He just had the cover of the 100th issue, doing like one of the more unique things that's been done. And like, so he doesn't, if he can be the writer of the year without having the cover.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, and you're saying, before we wrap this up, covers was a team decision.
Yeah, big time.
Any, like, I mean, there's a lot of covers. There had to be some disagreements in terms of, like, or was it pretty smooth sailing of consensus?
Honestly, pretty smooth sailing. There were hard parts when we might have felt like we didn't have anything that like really stood out. So then you're debating between like, you're like, man, you wish there was one that was just like, yeah, that's the one. Like, yeah, that's the one. Then you also have to, you have to play the game in sorts of like, well, dang, Danny Harf just had a cover and the next best photo is Danny Harf, or Danny Harf on his Ronix just got a cover and the next best shot is another like Ronix one board rider. And so it's like, well, we only have this many issues to play with. And so you sort of have to like try and find a balance. Like, well, can we save the other like Ronix shot for like later? Could it go in the photo annual? Could it be, you know, like, and so you sort of like I would have, as soon as like the year turned over, I would have a photo annual potential folder. And I would, anytime photographers dropped stuff that was like really, really good, and that could also then be, because it was photo annual, basically that means it could be considered for a cover. So I would have that to like work off of. And sometimes you're pulling out of that and using it before photo. Oh yeah, I do actually need a cover. Sometimes you're just getting like an email from a photographer and be like, dang, like that's definitely a cover. And so there is a balance that has to be played, you know, like how many wakeboarding covers have we done in a row? How many boat wakeboarding covers have we done in a row? Do we need to like put in a park? Do we need to do wake skating? So it becomes like a balance, because you don't want it to be just the same thing over and over. Right.
Yeah. It's tricky.
Yeah,
Definitely.
It is tricky. And then you have like relationships with advertisers and relationships with athletes, and you know, you have to try and like, you have to cater to some of those because it is a small industry. And obviously like magazines are reliant on ad dollars. But you also just have to try and, you want to also put out what you think is going to be the most entertaining and like good content.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's just a balance.
I guess two more questions. I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. Well, I got you.
Yeah, go for it.
Roadie, how's that determined? Who's on the panel?
When I was there, it was, you'd get input from, and actually we had a voting system. We had votes from the past Riders of the Year, and then
If they pick up the phone.
right, and then votes from the staff. And so we would just sort of and then the staff would take all of those votes and sort of debate.
Okay.
And sometimes we had like actual like in person, like if enough of the guys were in town, like you'd get together with, you know, Parks, Danny, Chad, Benny G, Aaron Reed, and I'm trying to think of some of who the first ones were. Those might have been like the first five. and just have a conversation. And yeah, and then just sort of like you just start.
Those had to be fun conversations.
It was super fun. Yeah, super fun because it was a big deal, you know, to not only those guys to have that title, but then to have input on who they thought was deserving.
It's a culture thing.
For sure. Thing. Yeah, for sure. So those could definitely turn into debates, you know, like, you know, it's the end of the year and who's stood out the most. And well, this guy's, you know, done this and this. Well, but this guy's done this, that, and the other. And, you know, it can get wild.
Talk about a good live stream. Get a chest full of beers and have the boys talk about who roadie should be.
We used to
entertaining.
We used to do a thing called the Style Roundtable at Alliance.
Yeah, I saw that in a couple.
Yep. So, and that was actually super fun to like get. And it was a mix of guys, you know, guys that were known for being like a little more style conscious and style forward, like Benny and Keith Lyman, and then guys that were just more contest focused, like a Phil Sovin or Josh Sanders, I think was even in some of those like conversations. And it was just super fun to listen to. And like ultimately, like what it comes down to is those guys all respect each other. Like they're all like top level like athletes and really good at what they do. It's just an interpretation of how you want to ride your wakeboard.
Yeah, right.
So
Wake Awards, how does that voting work at Wakeboarding Mag?
Wake Awards, so Wake Awards is an industry-wide award show. It started out as it was a part of Surf Expo, which was like the convention for like water sports, mainly surf, but wakeboarding had a huge presence there because it was in Orlando. Surf Expo has always been in Orlando. So it was always like the annual gathering of the industry, and people from all over the world were coming. And then, and it marked like, you know, it was in September. It always sort of marked the end of the season competitively. And Wake Awards was then in one of the huge rooms and a huge production with like, you know, lights and stage and sound and audio and, you know, probably usually Dano hosting it up there and all different categories for awards. And so I wasn't pro Wake Awards early on because I worked for Alliance. So I was like, you know, we would like, sometimes we would go, we wouldn't stay for the whole thing. So then when I obviously left Alliance and started working for Wakeboarding Mag, that became, I'm in charge of Wake Awards. And so it was sort of funny to like start working on it. And, but actually I did like, I never had a bad relationship with anybody at Wakeboarding Mag. I always had a good relationship. And actually they always had me vote. I was part of the panel because they wanted like industry opinions. Yeah. So there's always been a sort of collective panel that represents people in the media, maybe legends of the sport who aren't like active pros who could potentially like win some of the awards. Different reps or people from different, like you tried to spread it out like so that that pool of people, every brand had some inclusion, you know, maybe they're going to vote for guys that are on their brand, but it'll all get sort of evened out.
Kind of like Olympic style judging.
Right. Okay. There's about 5-6 judges from different countries for different events. So the thought was to have a pool. And then like a sort of like a weighted voting system. So like a first place vote would get you like 3 points, let's say. Second place gets you 2 points. Third place gets you 1 point. And then that helps potentially eliminate any sort of sandbagging. Because then there might be a guy that gets a lot of first place votes, but then also is getting recognized enough by other people in the industry to get some second place or third place votes. And so I think that should all count.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be this person got the most first place votes, so they're the best at, you know, female rider of the year, male rider of the year, trick of the year. Actually, trick of the year was chosen just by the staff of the mag, not industry, because the deadline, that was actually sort of the fun part of Wake Awards. One of the fun part about Wake Awards was trick of the year. The deadline was always usually until the day before the award show, maybe 2 days. So guys, especially as getting digital clips became an easier and easier thing to do, and you could then like submit them.
Yeah, film it on your phone and then submit it.
Right, and so you would like, you know, guys would be hucking themselves and trying to like stomp stuff, and you knew
it's the end of the season.
It's the end of the season, and so and people want, and like people wanted Trick of the Year has always been the biggest award, I feel like, for Wake Awards. And that was super fun. And then you're just whoever's like putting together like the highlight reel, you know, then you're just making sure like, okay, this one definitely deserves to go in the highlight reel, and you're dropping it in. And then you're sitting down like with a couple other people on the staff and being like, okay. And then you might like talk to some other, like I didn't always like being I always wanted to spread out opinions and not just be like, I'm not, you know, just judge and jury, you know. I never liked that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I have the right to do that. So I would try and, well, now actually, especially like wake skate Trick of the Year, I'm not an expert at like wake skating some of the tricks. So then I would create like a little panel of like guys that I would like send some of the clips to and be like, what's your vote for Trick of the Year? And sort of do the same thing with wakeboarding too. But yeah, so voting for the actual Wake Awards, huge panel, basically create a sheet of form, and send that form to the panel, ask them to, you know, log into it and cast their votes for each category, and then you tally it up.
What happened to Wake Awards?
Wake Awards is a super expensive show to put on, super expensive. So, I'm trying to remember, because you're at the convention center.
Yeah.
And obviously it was super convenient to tie it in with Surf Expo, and Surf Expo actually loved having it there because it was like, well, once the Surf Expo floor is closed for the day, then they can send a bunch of people, hey, well, you can, party's still going.
Yeah,
Head
a
up
lot
to
of
Wake Awards.
energy,
A lot of
reason to
energy.
come.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Surf Expo was a huge sponsor of Wake Awards, but ultimately, that show just sort of had to keep like finding ways to trim budget. Or I mean, and kudos to the Wakeboarding Mag higher ups for still allowing them like to do it. It was like a thing that they were very branded with, but at the end of like the first two that I did, the profit margin is little.
How much money are we talking? It's being spent on Wake Awards.
Oh, I mean, at one point when there's like I heard before I got there that some of the productions were like $250,000.
No shit.
Yeah, because it's at the convention center and you have all the union labor, you have to use the union labor workers.
Yeah.
You have to use the union labor workers to set up the stage, to set up the lights, to set up the chairs, the catering. Everything is like way more expensive because you're going through the convention center. Could there have been ways to adjust and make it cheaper by doing it off-site? Yes, and I think they actually tried it one year. They did it in a theater one year, and it just didn't go that well. It's so much easier if you're having it at a convention, to have it at the side of the convention.
100%.
It's everybody's there, and they just have to go upstairs into the big room and go party more, as opposed to everybody finding rides, what time's it starting, wait, how do you get there, you know, and it's wakeboarding. You know, you need to. It's like herding cats, and you need
make it easy for these
yeah,
dummies.
you need to keep those cats together, or else just shit hits the fan. So yeah, so wait, I mean, it turns into a budget thing. Eventually, marketing dollars stop getting spent on stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then there were, my 4 years there were 4 wild years for Wake Awards. So 2017, the first year, there is a hurricane rapidly approaching Florida, and when Ben and I started, so Wake Awards was always a Thursday night. So Surf Expo was always, I believe, a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe Sunday show. And Wake Awards was always the first night of Surf Expo. And I remember Benny and I we know that there's this hurricane coming, and I think it was Irma, and it's just bashing the Bahamas at this point and is on its way to just smash Florida. And Surf Expo has to make a call about whether to keep the show going or not. Ultimately, I think what ended up happening, the convention center, in emergencies down here, the convention center gets used for emergency vehicles. So they'll house, because there's all the storage bays that are inside the convention center. You put a bunch of the electric repair trucks in there, and you put other emergency response vehicles in there that can then get dispersed out. And so it almost became some of this space we
don't have anymore.
Yeah, we need it. And so in terms of making that call, I remember Ben told me this the other night when we were together. He's like, yeah, I had a meeting with the heads of Surf Expo like, hey, we're at a point like Surf Expo is gonna be one and done. Like it's Thursday, and then we're gonna have to tell everybody to like pack it up, like, and we're not gonna be able to do Friday and Saturday because of the hurricane. He's like, do you want to do Wake Awards, or do you want to just like, would you rather not keep people at the site and let everybody go home? He's like, if people are still okay, like I'll run the show because we've got a bunch of sponsor dollars in it, and we have created the whole show.
It's all ready to go.
It's all ready to go.
Yeah.
Like we just have to press play on it, and you know, everybody will still be here today. So it ended up being a great like Wake Awards. I was super nervous because it was my first one. I hadn't run it before, and the hurricane's coming, and so I had a few, not beers, and but it ended up going great. The next year, I think was just a normal Surf Expo. So that's 2017, 2018, 2019. We were fully canceled by a hurricane. So there was no Surf Expo, no Wake Awards. And that's when we had to pivot as like a staff, and we filmed Wake Awards as like a show. And me and Dana were like the hosts, and we were sitting in like Golden Bear Studios and with like a funny camper. And we were just trying to, I mean, we were sort of like just throwing stuff out there because we know we needed to create something, and we didn't have much budget or time.
Yeah.
And then the next year was COVID. And so then COVID canceled, I believe, Surf Expo completely.
Had to have, yeah.
And so then Wake Awards was like another like sort of video thing. I think that's when me and Dana did like a Zoom version of Wake Awards.
Okay.
But yeah. So Wake Awards were fun, stressful. And then I don't know, like I don't think they really kept up with, you know, I think they've still done some
There's
awards.
another Zoom version after you left, and then
Yeah.
I guess I don't know what the future holds.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. My favorite part actually was the trophies that Mike Forrest designed. So over the years, Wake Awards had a different trophy each year. Just get somebody either in the industry to make like something like that looked cool and unique for that year. And then I think it was actually Mike's idea. Mike was like, hey, like, what if like in order to like really try and brand Wake Awards, the trophy was something like an Oscar or an Emmy where it stays the same. He's like what if we came up with something that could be recreated over and over? And so he came up with like the WA logo in a 3D form.
It's cool.
And then and he was like, I think we could get these like 3D printed. Originally they had to get cast and then like in a mold. But then now the last year I did it, they were 3D printed, but can then get painted any color. So each year we would do, I think the first year was all like matte black, and then the second year was matte white. Then I think we did gold. And then I think I did like a hot pink ombre for my last year there. I still like, I think I have one of each. We would always like make extras in case one broke, or, you know, some of the staff would get to keep like a trophy from that year. I think I have one of each color. And
I'm sure Megan has them all. I think she
Megan,
won every year.
yeah. Megan and Gunther both. You can go to their house, see their trophy shelf, and there's like the different color Wake Awards.
Jeez.
Yeah.
All right. That's all I got. Is there
Sweet.
anything else you want to touch on? People you want to thank? Any of that good stuff?
I mean, too many people to thank, like, but it's been fun. It's been a really good ride. I'm still thankful that I'm involved, and like I'm not as active in like the actual like inside runnings of the industry. Obviously, not working for any sort of media outlet, but I'm still very connected, and I enjoy being connected, and thankful that people still trust me to be connected. I mean, just overall thank yous, like thanks to my parents for letting me be a kid that wanted to pick up a camera and not totally squashing my dreams and saying, no, you need to get a real job. I think my dad still shakes his, I still take my dad on like to some shoots and stuff, and he's still just like, what the hell?
What are you doing, kid?
Yeah, how did this all happen? Like, I got to take him in one of the helicopter rides for a boating magazine cover, and that was so fun. But then my parents were super supportive, obviously, like for me just to like run around over the summers and, you know, put miles on the car and gas and, you know, need help with like, so I could get some ramen and eat it wherever I was crashing. And dude, thanks to Bill and Tony at Alliance and Corey for like really like having my back early and like trusting me like with the mag and giving me the opportunity to grow with that mag and do all the stuff that we did with Alliance. We had so much fun. And then all the people at Bonnier that also trusted me with those franchises, Glenn and Rhonda, John McKever, Sean Bean, Benny G, that crew that I got to work with, like we were talking about earlier, Ben, Emily, and Mike, like we had so much fun, even though it was a short period. And, but thanks most of all to the wife, like she signed up, like knowing that we started dating when I was in the throes of traveling for Alliance and stuff. And I was still living with Jeff when we started dating. Like that's how we met, was through Jeff and his now wife. And, Jenna's my rock and has always supported me. So I wouldn't be able to, and she's been even more supportive and encouraging, like with me now, like trying to start my own business for the last couple of years. And it definitely would not have been possible, like either mentally or financially, was it not for her support. So shout out to the better half for sure. I'm a very, very lucky guy. Like, and I always realize that, like when I do some of these like sit down things and look back, or like talking to you the other day, and like when I pull out this archive every now and then and look back at stuff, or if I fire up my old, I have multiple versions of like all my photos from over the years just to like keep them safe. And so, but if I ever turn one on and try and like, I do something on Instagram where I take photos and try and like just write a little story about something from years past that I shot and put it on my Instagram. And so every now and then I fire that hard drive up and I'll just be like, man, there's a lot in here. I got to do a lot.
Yeah.
Got to go a lot of places. And I mean, just like, yeah, with my friends, I got to travel the world with my friends and take pictures of them and write stupid stories. And, but not all stupid. Like, you know, people care about wakeboarding. And so it was fun. I always wanted to make mags that put like the feeling, I would get so stoked, like as a kid looking at a magazine when a new one came in the mail, like no matter what was in it, I just wanted to like see it and read it and like, oh my gosh, this is like, look at this picture, this is so cool. Or, oh, how do you land that trick? Or, oh, this new boat looks insane. Like that's the same feeling I wanted to try and like give like while I worked at mags. And so hopefully I was able to do it, and not just like a total clown show, but and then thanks to all the riders and like anybody that like works, like you have to have a passion for the sport to like work in an industry like this. Like there's not millionaires that are at the, you know, ground level of like what makes wakeboarding go, you know? And so you've got to be really dedicated. And if you're starting, like whether or not you like work in the marketing department of one of the brands, or a factory for one of the brands, or you're running a cable park, or you're a lifty at one of the cable parks, you know, a cable operator, or you're working at a pro shop, like it's those people that make it go. And so, you know, I'm just thankful that there was enough around for wakeboarding to be more than it was, like to be like a culture and a thing, and not just a hobby. Like, and so I'm glad that I got to be part of it, like for a lot of that. And I'm glad that there is actually, I mean, as much as we talk about mags going away and stuff, there is still like wakeboarding is still a thing, and it's still a culture. And I don't think that's going away. And so I'm just thankful to have been able to like be a part of it and have my stamp on it somewhat, or at least like not even my stamp, but almost be an usher of sorts. Like here's the sport and here's some people, and you know, here's the church. Open the doors. But yeah, just to be like, you know,
be
like
a catalyst to show it to people.
Yeah, just to be a catalyst to show it to people. And dude, I mean, so many riders that you could thank, all the chase boat drivers, all the like riders that are down with like getting up early, staying out late, like and trying to get a shot or work on something, or just grinding, like you're miserable from traveling and board bags have been lost, and you know shit's going sideways, or weather is terrible, and you've traveled halfway around the world and you're like, what are we doing here? This is going to be a flop. But you manage to find a way. And it takes guys that are passionate and dedicated, and they understand that like, hey, like we can either be bitter about this and, you know, get nothing, or we can try. And so I'm stoked for that. Most of the times, like you're with guys that are game to try. And that I think makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know a lot of people appreciate all the work you've done
Thanks,
in the industry, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who, might not have heard about the guy behind the camera.
Right.
So,
yeah.
The camera guys are never as big, or the videographers are never as big as the guys who
Nope.
ride in the board, but they're just as important. Sometimes more important.
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, so thank you. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. Thanks
I'm
for
sure
having me.
people will be stoked to listen to this. As I always have to say, everyone keep sharing it on social. It means a ton. Really get the podcast out there. Like, comment, subscribe, buy the merch, all that good stuff.
Patreon it.
Patreon it,
some.
baby.
I'm going to get on the Patreon. I'm going to send in questions.
Oh, there we go. Those would be some
Are
good
you
ones.
are you letting Patreon people know who's like next on the interview?
Yeah, little heads up.
Oh,
Yeah,
all
that's how
right.
Dan got the little inside scoop there.
Fair enough.
So, yeah, thanks everyone for listening. See you next time.
Cheers.